The story begins at the largest merchant guild in the Central Plains, the Wyong Trading Company. That night, the place was completely reduced to ashes and rubble. Bodies and riches were scattered across the floor amidst the flames. The attack was the work of the demonic cult, who were now confronting the guild leader. A group of masked men surrounded the old master. The leader of the invaders provoked him, saying that in the end, he is just a merchant and not a martial artist. Then, he demanded that the guild leader hand over the key to make things easier. But the old merchant was not intimidated and asked if he looked like an idiot who would fall for that line. He said the real idiots were the members of the demonic cult for not realizing they couldn't kill him without the key. The guild master challenged them to open the chest with their martial arts, but warned that he would not be responsible for what was inside. The cultist then used a mind control technique and asked aggressively where the key was. The guild leader was caught by the technique, and his mind began to be invaded. He became desperate when he realized his own mouth was moving against his will. Under the cultist's control, he revealed that the key was hidden under his chair. One of the masked men immediately went to the indicated spot. Shortly after, one of them shouted from afar that he had found the key. The cult leader grabbed the chest and the key, thinking it was still too early to give up. The guild leader provoked him by asking why he didn't open the chest now that he had the key. The cultist then realized that the key required a special method to be used. The merchant continued his mockery, asking if he had already given up. Annoyed, the cultist used his technique again and ordered the guild master himself to open the box. Forced to obey, the old man cursed the leader of the martial alliance who had given him that task. He remembered that the chest had a special locket that required Q circulation, but that was useless against sorcery. While placing the key in the lock, he wondered what kind of trouble had been thrown into his hands. Upon opening the chest, a strong light shone from within, and he wondered what on earth that was. He couldn't believe they burned down his entire company in search of a single pill. At that moment, a blade was pressed against his neck. The cult leader said he would listen to his last words. A merchant then desperately asked how much it would cost for them to let him live, but the cultist replied that his followers did not covet riches and asked if he was done talking. The guild leader thanked him for helping him decide, leaving the masked man confused. He said he couldn't be the only one to suffer and die there, and he quickly swallowed the pill. He shouted that his way of business was to repay all favors and grudges as blue energy exploded from him. The cultist was startled by the old man's unexpected reaction, but in an instant, the merchant's head was severed and flew through the air. His consciousness faded as his body fell into an abyss of light. Suddenly, he woke up screaming in a totally different place. In a panic, he grabbed his neck, wondering if his head was still attached. Sitting on the bed, he was confused because he was sure his neck had been cut. Someone called to him, and he turned around, frightened. An older man scolded him, asking how someone who entered the Taoist gate could be so lazy. The man was shocked when he looked at that person's face. He recognized him as Elder Chiang Ion of the Wudang sect. The elder confirmed it was him and hit him with a staff, calling him a brat. Completely lost, he wondered what was happening. He remembered that more than 30 years had passed since he was a disciple of the Wudang sect. He was expelled, but he still remembered Chiang Ion as his master and didn't understand why he looked the same as before. And as if the situation weren't strange enough, something else appeared. A pile of bamboo strips floated in front of him, showing a list of talents and prices. Although it looked like an ordinary bamboo strip, it was simply floating in the air. As the master left, Huiyang realized that the mysterious floating list was visible only to him. He concluded that that bamboo strip must be the only clue to understanding what was happening. He analyzed the list and saw that he could buy talents with notes and prices, and he wondered if money really worked. The items and prices were absurd, with things like the legendary celestial eye or a martial bone for 3 300 taels. However, he found a fast movement ability that cost only 3 copper coins with a beginner's discount. Why? Yunnen called his master and said he had a question. With an innocent look, he asked the elder to lend him just 3 copper coins. The request left the master visibly annoyed, and the elder's response was to throw Ofwei, Young, out of the room. He landed outside in the sect's training courtyard. Even after the scolding, Aoi, Young seemed to be in a good mood. A few days passed, and he finally accepted that he had really returned to the past. He then remembered the pill that had brought him there, wondered if it was the Divine Demon pill. A pill capable of sending a person 30 years in the past was truly worthy of its name, but he still couldn't understand why the leader of the Martial Alliance would give him something so powerful. He thought the solution was simpler. Just don't accept the pill in the future. Without the pill, the demonic cult would have no reason to attack him, and he could live as a simple merchant. And with his knowledge of the future, he believed he could become an even greater merchant than before. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice asking if that was where he had been relaxing. Another disciple questioned him for not practicing martial arts. The young man reminded him that today was the evaluation for secular disciples. Awai Young recognized him as Jian Ozu, the son of the family that ran the Wuhan Bank. Why? Young replied that even if they did well, they would never become full disciples of the main sect. He even mocked the others' training, saying it didn't even look like Tai Chi. John Osu changed the subject and asked about the grass flutes Young was making. He explained that they were there more to make contacts than to train in martial arts. And the young disciples who had only trained their whole lives would probably love to buy something different, like a grass flute. Young remembered that in the future, Jayan Osu would become the owner of the Wuhan Bank. In his past life, he was expelled into just 1 month, so they never became close. John Osu tested one of the flutes, and Young decided there was no downside to getting closer to him. The young man praised Young's skill and decided to buy a flute for 3 copper coins. John Osu said goodbye and left, wishing him good sales. With a victorious smile, Young finally got the money he needed. He wondered how to use the bamboo strip and believed that if the pill was real, that must be too. When he held the coins, a mental message asked if he wanted to buy the quick movement ability. The purchase was confirmed instantly, and the bamboo strip disappeared. Startling him, he realized that just the desire to buy was enough, but he didn't feel a big difference in his body. Suddenly, a scream of pain caught his attention. He saw a main disciple twisting the arm of a secular disciple for criticizing his Tai Chi. The young disciple threatened to break the other's 2 arms for having offended him. The secular disciple was not intimidated and called them spoiled brats. But before the boy could break his arm, Young stepped forward. He appeared out of nowhere and managed to grab the main disciple's arm. The secular disciple who was being attacked was shocked by Young's speed. The youth threatened to break Young's arm as well, saying that a secular disciple would never beat him. Young then positioned himself to intervene in the situation. He asked for permission to intrude into the fight. With a formal gesture, he introduced himself as mocked Young, a secular disciple. He then politely asked the youth to release his friend so they could talk, but that the boy replied with arrogance that he could break the arm first and talk later. Young said that honestly, he didn't care what the young disciple would do to the other. The boy was confused by the unexpected answer. Young then changed the subject with a mischievous smile, saying he had a very good product to show. Some time later, the commotion had already dissipated. Young moved away from the training courtyard. Suddenly, he heard someone approaching and wondered who it could be. He walked away from the training courtyard toward a more isolated area of the mountain. Young sat down to continue his business of selling grass flutes. He tried to play the flute, but admitted that it was difficult to play as well as Jian Osu. Even so, he believed it would be good enough to attract the young disciples passing by. A boy named Myeonjeong approached and asked if they could try the flute. Young's friend intervened, saying that once someone put it to their lips, the value dropped because it became a used item. But Yang took the opportunity and said that that demo flute was different. He explained that it normally cost 5 copper coins, but since it was for a demonstration, he would give a special price. And with a big smile, he offered the flute for just 3 copper coins. The young disciples seemed disappointed with the offer. Why Young was confused because their reaction was not what he expected. Ignoring the reaction, he continued in a good mood and offered a special discount on the purchase of 5 flutes. Young explained shyly that he didn't usually carry money. He asked if he could buy on credit or perhaps pay with another item. Why Young realized that it was natural that children stuck on a mountain training all day would have no money. In fact, his plan was never to take the boys' money, but rather to create a connection with them. He thought that for now, joking with them about money was enough. With a sigh, he said he would give them a flute for free, and the boy was radiant. Why Young bowed and said it was an honor to offer his products to the disciples of the Wudang sect. Young smiled and said that at least Young knew how to show respect. He accepted the flute with gratitude. Young remembered that in his past life, that boy became a famous Wudang master. He remembered that the boy's nickname was the Invincible Sword of Taiji, and that he would become a great master. Young thought that being known by someone like him was definitely a profitable deal. Suddenly, a sword was pointed at his neck. A voice questioned him, asking who he was. The man accused him of tempting the sect's disciples with his cheap products. Young realized by his robes that he was of the same generation as Chiang Ian. He concluded that that must be the boy's master, and thought that martial artists always tried to intimidate with strength. He noticed that even the children next to the master were scared for no reason. Young was annoyed by the master's attitude, wondering why warriors treated everything non-martial as something vulgar. In a low voice, he grumbled if it was so wrong to appreciate a little music. The master stared at him coldly and asked what he had just said. Young quoted an old saying that what wavers is the eye. He continued, saying that the hand that pulls the bowstring in the heart that doubts the target also waver, and he concluded his reasoning by stating that the target is always at the same distance. He questioned the master if calling that temptation wouldn't be an exaggeration since he knew the truth. The master remained silent for a moment, and the flute fell to the ground. Young turned to leave, but the master called him impudent. An aura of blue energy exploded from the master's body, enveloping him completely. He asked if he should consider Young's words an insult to the rules of Wudang. Young was nervous, thinking that using internal energy was a bit unfair. He calmed himself, thinking that however reckless Wudang might be, they wouldn't kill someone over something so small. Faced with the pressure, he decided to respond in kind. He shouted that if the wind blows, a tree cannot stand still in its path, but only move forward, and all the tree can do is pray not to break. The master exploded in laughter and praised Young's courage. He was impressed that Young had managed to stay calm, even under the pressure of his aura. The master then decided to buy all 15 flutes for 75 copper coins. He asked about the discount Young had offered, and the young man replied that the special discount was only for minors. Young smiled and said that a revered master of Wudang would certainly not insist on paying the children's price. The master called him a ridiculous brat and handed him a paper. It was a note for 100 copper coins, and he told Young to keep the change as payment for intimidating him while the children played their flutes. The master asked Young's name. Young then asked for the master's house name, and the master was surprised that he didn't know it. The master introduced himself as Chiangwa. Young immediately recognized him as Chiangwa, the extreme and infinite divine sword. He was one of the 5 greatest masters of the Wudang sect, and in the future, he would become one of the 8 lords, a giant among giants. Young was shocked for having spoken that way to such an amazing person. With a nervous smile, he bowed and said it was an honor to meet the famous master. Chiangwa asked if he now understood who he had been speaking to, and Young agreed respectfully, but in his thoughts, he stated that just as Wudang had its path, a merchant also had his. Chiangwa smiled and called him a cheeky brat. He said that Young really didn't back down a single step and left with his disciples. Young sighed, relieved to have managed to get away with it. His friend praised him for the courage to speak that way to Master Chiangwa. Young thought that he had barely overcome one obstacle, and now another one already appeared. A bald and robust man approached and introduced himself as Sagot Ion of the Sungro Gate. Young knew he was the biggest troublemaker among the secular disciples, and before his regression, he was the main reason for his expulsion from Wudang. Saganayan approached and confirmed if he was Mok Wai Young. He said he heard that the son of the High King had become a secular disciple and imagined it was him. Wai Young denied it, saying he was just from a family of common farmers. Sagongayan mocked him, asking how he would survive in this world without a good background. He then offered to be Eko Young's friend, extending his hand. Wai Young remembered that in his past life, he had accepted that hand. At that time, without talent or support, he thought it was the chance of a lifetime, at least until the incident that led to his expulsion. Elder Cheon-Ion showed a bag that was found in the secular disciples' quarters. Inside the bag were several books with vulgar content. The other disciples whispered among themselves about the books. One of them recognized the books as belonging to Saganayan. Why? Young remembered that Saganayan never let him borrow the books, so he deserved what was happening. But to his shock, Cheong-Ion announced that the books were found in his room. Sagong-Ion accused him of bringing vulgar things to the sacred mountain, and Wai Young denied it desperately. The elder did not accept excuses, and with a furious shout, Cheong-Ion expelled him from Wuding. Wai Young remembered his anger upon realizing that he had been tricked and blamed for something he didn't do. At that time, he was struggling to survive, so revenge was out of the question. Back in the present, Wai Young stared at Saganayan with anger. Sagayan provoked him, saying that he thought he was the king of the place just by learning a little martial arts. Wai Young's friend intervened and defended him, irritated by Saganayon's arrogance. Wai Young then shouted for his friend to grow up and called him a bald punk. He stepped forward, determined not to repeat the same mistake. Sagayan smiled and said he thought he only talked a good game, but in reality, he was just a madman without brakes. Wai Young smiled and said that at this rate, someone would end up getting punched. He challenged him, asking if they should fight with everything and get expelled together. Saganayan was silent for a moment, surprised by Wai Young's audacity. He turned and said with a threatening look that he would be watching him. Wai Young thought it was a pity, as he wouldn't mind fighting and getting expelled. He remembered that in his past life, this happened a month later, but now he needed to get out of there to use his knowledge. He decided he would have to pull something off. During the disciples' evaluation, Janosu called him worried. He asked what was wrong with Wai Young and what he would do if he had to face Saganayan in the fights. Wai Young replied calmly that the pairings were random and that he would handle it when the time came, but in fact, he knew exactly who his opponent would bear, one of Saganayan's subordinates. He remembered that in his past life, he was completely crushed for having no talent or strength, but now he had a small trump card in his hand. At night, the secular disciples' evaluation finally began. Several fights were already taking place in the training arena. Elder Cheon-Ion watched the fights with a bored look. Suddenly, Cheon-Woo arrived and commented that the evaluation had already started. Cheon-Ion asked what brought him there, and he replied that his master suggested he take a look at the disciples. Cheon-Ion said there was no disciple worth watching. Cheon-Woo asked if the opponents were chosen randomly, and the elder admitted he had made some adjustments. Cheon-Woo was curious about his martial brother's confession. From afar, Young and John Ozu watched the fights while relaxing. Cheon-Woo watched Wai Young with a thoughtful look. He then asked Cheon-Ion for permission to adjust the next fight. The elder agreed, and Wai Young suddenly felt a chill down his spine. Cheon-Ion announced the next fight and called Wai Young to the arena. Wai Young said a goodbye to his friend and said he would be back soon. He entered the arena and awaited the announcement of his opponent. To his surprise, his opponent was Saganayan himself. Wai Young was shocked by the sudden change of opponent. He looked at the masters and realized it was Cheon-Woo who had changed the fight. Cheon-Ion shouted that if both were ready, the fight could begin. Saganayan smiled maliciously, thinking his chance had come earlier than he expected. He advanced against Wai Young, calling him a rascal. He shouted that he had warned he would be watching him and set off to attack. Wai Young was desperate because because that was not part of his plan. Even so, he decided he already planned to land a blow on him anyway. He threw a small bag of powder into Sagonayan's face. The unexpected attack surprised Cheonghwa and hit Sagonayan squarely. With a victorious smile, Young prepared to continue the attack. Sagonayan screamed in pain as Young approached quickly. He prepared for the next blow and hit him with a powerful punch called Triple Talent Fist. He said one punch was not enough and hit him again in the back. But suddenly, he felt his body strange and stopped the attack. Sagonayan took the opportunity and grabbed Young's arm. He threw him to the ground with force and immobilized him. Young thought he got carried away and hit him twice without thinking. Sagonayan stared at him with his eyes glowing with anger. He swore he would kill him and Young wondered what he would do to him now. Sagonayan ended up being taken by surprise by the sandbag thrown right into his face. Young pointed to the situation with mockery, while the others began to shout indignantly. The elder was furious at the cheating and complained that tactic seemed like something from demonic sects. But suddenly, a hand touched the elder's shoulder to contain his anger. It was Cheonghwa who intervened silently, calming his martial brother. He suggested that they just keep watching the fight for a little longer. The master realized that the young man had some plan in mind by acting that way. Meanwhile, Sagonayan became totally enraged and advanced, delivering a powerful kick, but Young demonstrated impressive agility and dodged the blow at the last second. He landed on the ground crouching as he prepared to counterattack the adversary. Realizing the opening, the protagonist advanced with all speed to strike the rival. He landed a precise punch on Sagonayan's chin with extreme precision. Young looked at his own fists, feeling a strange and new sensation. He realized that the Triple Talent Fist was flowing with perfect ease from his body. All thanks to the quick movement ability he bought for just 3 coppers, but the injured rival screamed in pain and fury, heading for a desperate attack. Young dodged again, surprised that a single ability had changed the combat so much. He connected one more devastating blow, right in the middle of his opponent's face. Sagonayan was left completely stunned by the direct impact and lost his posture. Young smiled, excited to realize how appealing the power he had just acquired was. He decided he needed to get out of there as soon as possible to start making a lot of money, but his flow of thoughts was interrupted when he heard a dark threat. Sagonayan wiped his bleeding mouth and swore darkly that he would kill him. Young was worried to note that the opponent was about to use his internal energy. The rival took a deep breath, concentrating all his Q to deliver a fatal blow. Sagonayan attacked with an absurd speed, making clear the difference in internal strength. Pressured and without space to dodge, Young realized he had nowhere to run. He began to question himself if it really was impossible to beat someone with internal energy. The rival advanced furiously to finish the fight with all his accumulated power. Young knew that just ordinary physical strength would not be enough against that blow. However, Cheonghwa appeared out of nowhere and blocked the mortal attack, ending the dispute. The master positioned himself with his sword, facing the aggressor with extreme seriousness. He reprimanded Sagonayan, saying that using internal energy against beginners was a shame. Sagonayan tried to defend himself, arguing that he was attacked first with cheating. Cheonghwa agreed that the protagonist also acted in a totally wrong way in the fight. He condemned the cheap trick, stating that a disciple of Wudang should never act like that. Cheonghwa warned that he would receive a severe punishment, and the youth accepted it resignedly. With that intervention, the master declared that the secular disciple's evaluation was over. Young celebrated in silence for having managed to achieve all his goals. He managed to hit the rival and even arranged a perfect reason to be expelled from there. Free from the sect, he planned to start sketching his successful commercial business. The young man already started to architect in his mind every step of his bright future. Meanwhile, Cheonghwa reflected thoughtfully on what he had just witnessed in the courtyard. Cheonghwa approached him, asking if everything was okay after the closing. The elder insisted that the protagonist must be expelled for having acted with pure malice. Cheonghwa just closed his eyes in silence, listening to the irritated complaints. He questioned his brother if he hadn't noticed something incredible in the execution of the movements. He recalled that the boy acted with absurd precision without having trained other arts. Even with so little learning time, his movement proved impeccable. That could only mean that youth possessed a monstrous natural talent. Elder Cheong Ion insisted that the rules of Wudong are rigid and that the culprit needs to be punished. He then turned to his older brother, asking what punishment they should apply. Cheong was thoughtful with a light smile, imagining the best punishment for the boy. The elder announced in a loud voice that Manhwa Young would temporarily serve in the treasure pavilion. He told the youth to be extremely grateful for that friendly decision by Master Xianghua. Upon leaving, the elder wondered why they didn't decide to expel the youth for good. Hawaii. Young was completely paralyzed upon realizing that his plans to be expelled had failed. He panicked, wondering why things had changed so much in relation to his past. The unexpected change completely ruined the strategy that the protagonist had plotted. His colleague tried to console him, saying that at least he managed to avoid expulsion. The colleague encouraged him to train harder now that he had demonstrated having talent for the sword. The youth just grumbled with disdain, totally rejecting any praise about his talent. He remembered that in his previous life, he failed miserably at mastering any martial art. All that ease from before came from the system's mysterious martial talents shop. Leaving the layman's aside, the youth decided to accept his fate for now. He said goodbye to his friend and started to walk toward the sect's treasure pavilion. He realized with regret that his quick exit from Wudong would have to be delayed for some time. Upon learning the pavilion handles finances, he decided to take the chance to profit. However, his optimistic plans crumbled as soon as he entered the large pavilion. The youth came face to face with Master Qianghua waiting for him with a beautiful smile. He was in shock to discover that Qianghua himself was the one responsible for the location. The master revealed that, in truth, he came just to designate the messenger role to the youth. Why? Young was startled to hear that he would have to work making deliveries for the sect. He despaired at noting the absurd distance he would have to travel on foot between the peaks. Qianghua tried to reassure him, saying that the work would just be an extra help. The master decided to guide the youth through the mountain to teach him the paths of the location. He turned backward to ensure that the youth was following him closely. Why? Young realized with despair that his situation there had become completely terrible. Later, night fell over the Wudong mountain, bringing absolute silence. Hawaii. Young analyzed the dangerous paths he would need to cross from the following day. He decided he would not risk his precious second life by falling off some cliff. The protagonist started to walk silently with light steps in the middle of the darkness. He slipped out of his quarters to set his new plan in motion quickly. Why? Young ran with all his strength, realizing that fleeing in the middle of the night was his only way out. The full moon illuminated the sect's large main gate while he tried to escape, but suddenly he hesitated for an instant, evaluating the darkness of the path ahead. He was surprised by the total pitch blackness when distancing himself from the illuminated limits of the sect. The youth regretted not being able to buy the night vision ability using bank notes. Without viable alternatives, he decided to light a torch to illuminate his path. He raised the torch firmly, determined to advance even if it was an evident risk. The youth went down the stairs, knowing that the light would make him an easy target for the guards. He tried to convince himself that the mountain was too big for anyone to find him, but his hopes lasted little when he spotted shadows emerging from the dark. Two figures from the sect appeared before him, blocking the passage instantly. Under the aim of a sword, he invented quickly that he was just a herb harvester. He lied, saying that he ended up falling asleep during work and woke up late. The guard found the excuse very strange, but the youth insisted, showing the herbs. He extended his hands, showing some green leaves picked in a rush from the ground. The guards analyzed the leaves, not knowing for sure if those really were herbs. The protagonist mocked in thought, knowing they couldn't differentiate herbs from weeds. The guard decided to let it pass and returned the torch, warning him to be careful when descending. Relieved to get past the guards, he ran down the stairs, anxious to go down the mountain soon. Hawaii Young spotted the large main gate, knowing his freedom was a few steps away. He smiled with arrogance, certain that no one else would be able to prevent his escape now. Suddenly, a firm voice called his name, making him freeze in the middle of the path. Upon looking back, he recognized that striking voice he feared so much to hear again. The master appeared with a mysterious smile, demonstrating that he already foresaw that attitude. Chiolwa asked if the yearly thought his escape attempt would go unnoticed. The protagonist lamented internally for being caught again by the same persistent master. He surrendered and asked the master how he managed to discover his true intentions. Chiolwa smiled lightly and questioned if the youth doubted the perception of a trained warrior. The master explained that facial expressions and muscles never lie about what we feel. Knowing he was caught, the youth asked directly what the master intended to do with him. Before taking any action, the master stated he wanted to hear a sincere answer. He questioned the reason for wanting to leave Wudang. When thousands dream of entering the sect, Huaiyang lied, saying he preferred to leave because he knew he didn't have the necessary talent. The master countered the argument firmly, pointing out that the youth didn't even try for real. The protagonist insisted on the lie of being a lost case in the hope of being released. Chiolwa said he saw through that lie because the youth's talent was truly incredible. He asked for sincerity and promised to keep the real reason for his departure a secret. Without being able to speak about the talent system, the youth decided to invent another explanation. He stated in an audacious tone that the Wudang sect was simply too small for him. He decided to speak his mind without fear, thinking that now he would certainly be sent away. A heavy silence took over the environment, while the master just stared at him without reaction. The protagonist started to shake from nervousness, wondering if he ended up crossing reasonable limits. He asked if the master was okay, noting that he started to give low laughs. To his astonishment, Chiolwa said he understood perfectly the meaning of his words. The youth filled with hope, thinking that finally he would be released without major problems. But the master denied it firmly, leaving the youth completely frustrated and confused. He stated that as a member of Wudang, he could not let someone speak like that and stand still. The master drew his blade, saying he would personally show the true essence of Wudang. He assumed a combat stance, while a bright blue energy enveloped his sword. Young protected himself from the strong wind. Realizing that the air pressure changed suddenly, he was startled to note that that went far beyond a simple martial arts blow. The master jumped through the air, emanating a trail of mystical energy of extreme beauty. An immense yang symbol drew itself on the ground around them due to the powerful aura. Chiolwa asked the boy to pay close attention to each of his movements. His steps became so fast and light that they seemed to slide smoothly across the soil. Several traces of the master appeared in the arena, simulating a sequence of perfect attacks. Young watched everything in a trance, finding that display of techniques beautiful. The master's movements were incredibly smooth, flowing like the waters of a calm river. At the same time, his attacks gained an overwhelming aggressiveness. Suddenly, the sequence of blows was uninterrupted, reminding of the deep vastness of a wild ocean. It was the legendary secret technique known as the Taiji Wisdom Sword. The master finished the demonstration under the moonlight, exhibiting an impeccable presence. The mystical pattern on the ground started to dissipate slowly as the energy calmed down. Young continued in a trance, and with his jaw dropped after witnessing such power. Chiolwa asked in a friendly way if the youth managed to understand the martial lesson. The youth remained silent for an instant before confessing that he had just one doubt. With curiosity, the master wanted to know what exactly was going through his disciple's head. Chiolwa put his sword away and recalled the youth's mockery about the size of the sect. The master extended his hand, emanating a mysterious purple aura to prove the depth of Wudang. The protagonist remained hypnotized, looking closely at the impressive energy that flowed from there. The master guaranteed with total conviction that the sect was capable of sheltering any type of talent. Young hit his own forehead, indignant at seeing how warriors summarize everything into fights. He knew that trying to make a future great merchant become a Taoist monk was totally useless. He apologized for the previous audacity, but made it clear that his opinion on leaving didn't change. Young shouted very loudly, reaffirming his total refusal to remain on that mountain. The master watched him in silence for a moment, before asking the reason for such stubbornness. The youth replied that it was just a wish of his and asked what the master intended to do. He challenged, saying that the decision was his while the master just listened calmly. Chiyonwa said the youth really had no idea of the dimension of his own talent. He compared the youth's escape to a child jumping into a well without anyone trying to intervene. The master's determined look made it clear that he did not intend to let the youth ruin himself. Chiyonwa decreed authoritatively that he was forbidden from leaving the sect without his order. He reminded that the youth's parents would certainly support his stay under the master's guard. "Why?" Young shouted in despair, not understanding why the master made such a point of holding him. He claimed furiously that he was just a simple son of a farmer without great aspirations. The youth pointed out that Wudang already had everything it needed and did not need someone like him. He clamored for a logical answer, while the master's silence left him tense. A corner smile appeared on the master's face before his final revelation. Chiyonwa replied with total mockery, saying that there was simply no specific reason. The next day, after the shameful failure of his escape, the youth woke up at his new post. He discovered that he had been promoted temporarily to the role of internal disciple of Wudang. The master explained that it would be difficult to watch the boy's steps as a mere secular disciple. He revealed that the sect leader did not trust him fully to give the definitive position. The master encouraged him with fervor, saying that his effort could guarantee the official position. The boy despaired, knowing he needed to get out of there to manage to buy more talents. He considered for a second, revealing the whole truth about the system shop and the money. But he concluded it would be madness and decided to continue walking with his head down with the master. He thought that if he had a little money, he could buy talents to try another escape. With a sudden idea in his head, the youth called the master in an urgent tone. He asked shamelessly if the master by chance had any money stored with him. Chiyonwa was perplexed, admitting that that was the most unusual question he had ever heard. The youth justified himself, asking to exchange the note he received earlier for real coins. The master pointed out that money didn't have much utility there, but the youth insisted on the request. Chiyonwa accepted the request and took the paper, promising to make the exchange quickly. However, upon entering the pavilion, they were received with questions about the punishment. The master appeared holding a beautiful pile of freshly exchanged copper coins. To the boy's unhappiness, the master warned that he would withhold the money until the end of the punishment. The protagonist went into absolute despair, shouting that those coins belonged to him. The master said he was just guarding them, and the youth retorted that money from now was worth much more. The master mocked, asking if he wanted interest, and the boy just begged for the coins. The master guarded the coins, smiling, while pretending to lament deeply for the situation. He confessed that if he returned the money, the youth would certainly try to escape again. The master guaranteed the return after the end of the forced service and withdrew from the location. All that shouting ended up attracting the attention of another important member of the pavilion. A sleepy man appeared complaining about the noise that disturbed his precious rest. Chiyonwa greeted the newcomer respectfully, calling him Brother Cheongsu. Cheongsu vented ironically about his new role as master of the treasure pavilion. Cheongsu analyzed the protagonist from top to bottom without thinking. He had the look of a real fighter. Chiyonwa thanked the sect brother with a subtle bow, leaving the boy under his care. The newly arrived master sighed with exhaustion while watching his companion move away from the location. Hoai, Young asked what he should do now, suspicious that the two plotted against him. Without viable alternatives, the youth decided just to follow the master and obey his orders. Cheongsu explained simply that the work schedule would be from dawn until dusk. He ordered the youth to deliver several bamboo tubes to the distant Samcheong pavilion. Young despaired, remembering that pavilion was at the highest point of the mountain. He argued desperately that without lightness arts, he would just delay the entire delivery service. Protagonist realized the real problem was still to be revealed by the master. He was completely horrified to see the colossal size of the bag he needed to carry. The boy threw himself on the ground, throwing a tantrum and shouting that he would certainly die falling off a cliff. The master threatened him coldly, saying he would be expelled for neglecting his obligations. He reminded that the youth now had official obligations for being an internal disciple. He warned severely that the expulsion of an internal eternal disciple, required the destruction of the Danshin. Why? Young shook with dread, knowing that having his Danshin destroyed would leave him crippled forever. Chiangsu withdrew, ordering him to present himself in his room. As soon as he finished the task, the boy punched the ground, cursing the trap set by Master Chiangwa. Without a choice, the youth started to organize the heavy bamboo tubes inside the large bag. He put the immense load on his back, complaining bitterly about his terrible luck. He grabbed the sharp rocks with force while starting his steep climb. The youth cursed the crazy masters of Wudang while climbing with pure fury. With much effort, his hand finally reached the top of the cliff's stone edge. He dragged himself up, completely exhausted, and with his clothes dirty with dust. The youth collapsed on his back on the ground, gasping and feeling he would die of exhaustion. He tried to console himself, appreciating the beautiful view from up there, while another monk approached. The monk received him with impatience, complaining about his enormous delay to deliver the letters. He warned coldly that the youth would not be able to rest until he finished all the deliveries. The youth remained thrown on the ground, processing the size of the suffering that still awaited him. He faked a serene smile to hide the immense desire to commit something crazy. From the top of the cliff, he cursed the entire sect under the beautiful sunset light. The following morning, Chiangsu walked calmly through the pavilion, ready to start the day. The master looked to the side, noting that someone was approaching him in the hallway. Chiangwa appeared with a smile on his face, wanting to know how the boy's performance was. Chiangsu stared at him with disdain, reminding him that it was the companion himself who gave the evil idea. He complained that the sect brother possessed extremely cruel hobbies with the newcomers. The climb of that cliff required the essence of the lightness, art of blue cloud steps. Anyone who tried to climb without mastering that technique ended up slipping and falling. It was an incredibly dangerous location, where it was difficult to climb successfully just once. Chiangwa laughed and said that who forced the youth to climb in the middle of the night was the brother himself. Chiangsu pondered that even a genius wouldn't manage to perform that climb in the darkness. He stated that that type of severe ordeal rarely brought any positive result. Chiangsu went to verify the deliveries and told the companion to see the situation with his own eyes. Chiang was spied inside the workroom with quite some curiosity in his look. He suddenly noted something strange and called for the master with a suspicious tone. Chiangsu closed his eyes, knowing exactly what the companion just noted with surprise. He replied calmly, saying that in truth, everything was going well, even too well. They watched the youth sleeping deeply after having delivered all the packages. The youth managed to conclude with success all the deliveries in a single night. For that, he needed to go up and down that mortal cliff at least 3 times in a row. The master admitted, surprised, that he had never seen anyone master the blue cloud steps on the first day. To perform that feat, the protagonist's hands became completely wounded and calloused. Why Young needed to use all his willpower and extreme determination to persist. Chiangsu thought the youth proved that there always exists a prodigy beyond common expectations. He reflected that if the boy had started 10 years earlier, he would be a pillar of the martial world. The master was brought back to reality when the youth called him in a tired and sleepy tone. Wai Young finally woke up from his deep sleep. Facing the master with a tired look, Chiangsu decided secretly that it was time to pressure the boy with even harder training. The youth noted the strange mood in the room and started to stretch to shake off the laziness. He complained loudly, remembering how he thought he would die on the climb of the previous day. He knew that the success on the climb was only possible thanks to his system Talent Shop. The master provoked him, asking if he was already exhausted from such a simple job. Chiangsu ordered bluntly that he get up soon and stop wasting time with laziness. He tried to return the blanket, but the master refused with disgust for it being full of saliva. Chiangsu said to do whatever he wanted with the blanket, and the youth decided to stay with the item. The master watched the youth guard his belongings with a serious and focused expression. He ordered the youth to collect the new letters from the office to follow him immediately. Chiangsu warned that the two needed to go to a specific location outside the pavilion. The two started to walk side by side toward the mysterious destination down the mountain. Wai Young accompanied him in silence, silence, trying to guess where the master was taking him. The youth noted they were on the Sancheong route and wondered if he would just make new deliveries. Suddenly, the master threw a piece of cloth straight at the boy's face. Upon holding the fabric, he recognized it as the strip used to blindfold eyes during training. The master ordered without beating around the bush that he use the strip to cover his vision completely. To Young's horror, he received the order to climb that mortal cliff again. Pissed off with the absurd request, the youth threw the strip on the ground in a sign of pure revolt. He shouted, irritated, complaining that managing to climb at night didn't mean being able to do it blindfolded. The boy refused categorically to fulfill what he called a ridiculous and senseless order. The master threatened to destroy his dantian, which made the youth put on the blindfold in a rush. Completely blindfolded and tense, the youth faced the immense stone wall without knowing how to start. He extended his trembling hands, feeling the cold rock in search of some point of support. He cursed internally, thinking that that task was just a disguised way to kill him. The youth supported his foot with extreme care, questioning the sanity of whoever created that test. He knew that his movement ability helped, but a single wrong step would be fatal. Suddenly, a strange bluish energy started to flow from his hand in contact with the stone. He reacted with astonishment to realize that a totally new sensation was dominating his body. To his absolute shock, he realized he managed to see even while blindfolded. A luminous path of blue lines appeared on the rock, indicating the exact locations to support. Guided by the shining lines, he started to move with surprising confidence. Each touch on the rocks emanated an energy glow that propelled him with precision. He felt as if the mountain itself was driving and guiding his feet on the climb. The youth understood that he didn't need to choose the path, since the right supports revealed themselves. A perfect trail materialized before him at each movement executed with mastery. He followed the projected route that served as a luminous guide to lead him to the top. He reached the summit, feeling that his internal energy flowed in perfect harmony with the climb. He admired the efficiency with which his body executed the complex movement technique. The youth finally understood that he had just learned the official Wuding step art. He touched his abdomen upon feeling that his dantian was burning with a new and strong energy. He realized that that advance was infinitely superior to what he reached in his past life, but the master soon hit him on the head, demanding the reason he had removed the blindfold from his eyes. Young rubbed his painful head, complaining about the master having thrown the book with such force. The youth looked at the manual in his hands, realizing it was an advanced technique guide. Chiang-su said directly that that was the step technique manual that he had just learned. Master pointed out that reading the book and understanding the theory would bring a totally different result to the youth. Mokwoi. Yang held the book, feeling a deep strangeness with everything he was experiencing. He recalled that in his old life, he only learned cheap techniques from second-rate sects. At that time, without any type of talent, he never managed to master a single real fighting style. But now, in his new chance to live, he learned one of the advanced techniques of the 9 great sects. He started to laugh softly and happily, leaving the master irritated with his bizarre behavior. The youth returned to paying attention when the master said that that was just a small glimpse. Chiang-su guaranteed that the boy would have access to much deeper secrets if he were promoted for good. He asked with mockery if, even knowing all of that, the youth still had the desire to flee the sect. Young asked if, as an internal disciple, he could continue acting in the businesses of the secular world. The boy got excited, thinking he could open businesses, but the master clipped his wings right then and there. He explained that with the leader's endorsement, he could at most act protecting the Wudang businesses. The youth was extremely frustrated with the answer and handed back the empty delivery bag. Thinking he finished the day, he said goodbye happily, but the master said coldly for him to stop. Chiang-su warned that the day's service hadn't finished yet, leaving the youth confused and indignant. He revealed that from now on, the youth would be in charge of making all the deliveries of the sector. Young was furious with the master's unfair attitude and gritted his teeth, feeling enormous anger. The boy lamented for seeing his brief joy of having learned the new technique be destroyed so quickly. He protested, demanding how they could change his task agreement without warning him beforehand. While the youth yelled furiously. The master just closed his eyes, ignoring the complaints totally. Upon being called a stubborn madman, the master finally got irritated, demonstrating his enormous fury. In a blink of an eye, Qiangzu landed a blow right in the middle of the daring disciple's forehead. The protagonist let out a loud moan of pain, falling immediately to the ground without strength. The master watched him on the ground and questioned if he lost for good his own love for life. He said that disobeying a master and insulting him was a grave offense inside that mountain. The master reprimanded him in a harsh way and warned that he would suffer punishments if he continued acting badly. In the distance, it was possible to hear the cries for help echoing from the mountain while he returned to the task. A strong and implacable rain started to fall, covering all the pavilions with dense clouds. The protagonist ran under the storm, determined to finish the service as soon as possible. Back at the pavilion, he squeezed his soaked clothes, complaining about that cursed rain. He dried himself, taking off the top part of his vestments to avoid catching a strong cold. He looked at himself and wondered where that storm so violent and fast arose from. 2 months passed, and he realized that the exhausting work ended up strengthening his body. The youth noted that the master didn't explain the training benefits intentionally. Besides his physical advance, the system shop also started to evolve in an advantageous way. New purchase options appeared, and the enormous list of talents was now difficult to read entirely. Amused with the evolution, the boy felt he was playing and evolving a game character. Without warning, the master appeared from behind and landed a blow right on the top of his head. He complained of pain, but the master questioned the way he used the steps to return. Qiangsu pointed to the footprints on the ground and instructed him to walk without even leaving marks on the soil. He realized that, in truth, the master's blows stimulated his cue points to help him. Qiangsu finally praised the boy, saying he reached the minimum required from the training. Manhwa appeared smiling, announcing that it was time for the youth to start his training in archery. To Young's disappointment, he warned that the delivery service would continue in the free hours. The master promised to take him to the archery pavilion to introduce his other companions. The boy heard surprised upon learning that those disciples would be his future martial brothers. With a silent nod, the youth agreed, knowing new challenges awaited him at the temple. Manhwa walked calmly while Young followed him closely, determined to discover what would happen now. He wondered with the great expectation if the moment to learn martial arts correctly had finally arrived. Young remembered how he was frustrated when Manhwa brought him to the sect as a temporary internal disciple. He complained that his only task so far was delivering letters, and that the master did nothing directly for him. Whenever he questioned the reason for being there, Manhwa's answer was just that everything would happen in its time. Although that excuse seemed ridiculous at the beginning, he realized that that long-awaited moment finally arrived. The youth wondered what type of senior martial brothers he would meet and hoped they would be easy to talk to. Suddenly, Young's expression changed completely to a grimace of pure shock and disappointment with what he saw. Meanwhile, the master continued with a happy and humorous smile on his face, without caring about the boy's reaction. He looked at the small children in front of him and noted discouraged that perhaps he was expecting too much from that place. The little boys ran excited, holding grass flutes, and the protagonist realized horrified that they were his seniors. He asked indignant if he really would have to call those children seniors, and the master confirmed with naturalness. How? Young shouted in protest against the absurd decision, reminding everyone that he was already a young adult of 20 years. The youth pointed to the children, claiming that they were much younger, and that calling them seniors didn't make sense. The master explained that that was super common in the martial world, but the protagonist insisted that that situation was exaggerated. The youth forced a yellow smile and tried to calm himself, remembering that he was still just a temporary disciple of the sect. Manhwa tried to reassure him, saying he didn't need to call them that now, and that he could take the time he needed. The master said he had other obligations and simply flew off, leaving the children under the youth's responsibility. Young extended his hand without reaction and remained completely speechless upon being abandoned like that in the courtyard. At that moment, a boy approached from behind him and asked with authority if he was the new junior disciple. A boy with dark hair and an extremely serious look positioned himself in front of the protagonist, expecting an answer. He stared at Young with an unfriendly expression and demanded in a curt way that the youth answer the question. The youth replied that yes, and noted by the others' silence that grumpy boy must be the oldest senior there. The little boy scolded him for speaking that way, and the protagonist quickly got tired of all that premature arrogance. The boy introduced himself as Myongzong, and the protagonist realized he was a little proud and proper warrior. Myongzong said in a curt way that the youth seemed determined to mess him up the entire internal order of the Wudong sect. He complained that Yun's grass flutes were taking the focus of the younger ones, who should just be training. Young listened with attention to the little boy's dramatic complaints while observing him closely with a doubtful look. The protagonist showed one of the flutes and asked with irony if all that scolding was because of a simple toy. Upon noting the desire glow in the boy's eyes, he realized that Myongzong in truth wanted a grass flute very much. Amused with the discovery, the youth decided to provoke the little senior a bit and prepared to play the toy. The silence of the courtyard was broken, shrill and high the sound of the instrument that started to echo through the location. Young played the grass flute in a clumsy way under the attentive and curious look of all his small companions. The shrill noise of the toy continued echoing through the courtyard, while some leaves flew with the mountain breeze. The children started to applaud, excited the boy's performance. While he finished his small musical presentation, he told Myongzong that as senior of the group, it was of extreme importance that he set a good example for the younger ones. The youth suggested that if the senior used the toy only during breaks, the younger ones would certainly follow his conduct. With a friendly gesture, Young offered the flute as a gift and asked him to keep the younger boys in line. Myongzong extended his hand hesitantly and accepted the gift from the junior youth with some shyness. The little boy pretended he was just accepting out of politeness, while the younger ones commented about him being tense lately. Suddenly, a loud and arrogant voice interrupted the group, complaining about the annoying noise they were making there. Everyone turned quickly and spotted a group of older disciples approaching with intimidating expressions. Myongzong closed his face and asked with a tone of discontent what they thought they were doing at that location. The leader of the newcomers was the intimidator Myonghan, who appeared with arms crossed with an imposing and robust posture. Young was confused with the similarity of the disciples' names and feared ending up confusing them all from then on. Myonghan said that Myongzong should be ashamed for acting in such a silly way before his own subordinates. Protagonist watched him scared, thinking that youth's face was intimidating enough to kill someone. The brute approached Young and asked if he was the street vendor who was distributing useless flutes. He made a violent threat, asking if the protagonist wanted to have his hands severed for doing that in Wuding. Myongzong stepped in front of the youth to defend him and guaranteed to the bully that he himself would take care of punishing his junior. Myong pointed with disdain, asking if Myongzong really considered that simple street vendor as his junior. The bully smiled with mockery and stated that if the boy was just temporary, then he must be his target for the time there. Myonghan's henchmen started to laugh, asking if a youth of that age wasn't ashamed to try to enter the sect. One of the youths took a loud step forward, preparing to intimidate even more the protagonist, who just observed. Myong pointed the thumb at his own face and said with irony that the youth simply didn't have the slightest notion of his age. The bully hit with his wooden sword on his shoulders, demonstrating to be totally confident that he would win any fight. Without intimidating, Myongzong drew his own sword and faced the bully with a cold and extremely focused look. The little boy said with firmness that was enough of small talk and stated that Young was now his true disciple. Myong got irritated with the younger one's tone and asked if he really preferred to resolve that entire situation in the worst way. The protagonist watched the younger one's discussion with an exhausted expression, without understanding how he got involved in that trouble. Young looked at the group gathered in the courtyard and wondered with frustration what on earth he was doing in that place. One of the little seniors approached Young and whispered that those bullies were disciples of Elder Cheongyu. The little boy explained that their masters didn't get along, and that because of that, the disciples lived fighting for any reason. Myung shouted for Myung to get out of the way, saying he needed to punish the new junior for disturbing the sect's peace. But Myung refused categorically, insisting that he himself would take care of the discipline of his new and precious disciple. Myung advanced with fury, questioning who he thought he was to stand between his duty of punishing the insolent newcomer. Myung positioned himself and said with coldness that if he wanted so much to know the answer, he would have to discover it through the sword. Brute smiled at the corner, finding funny the audacity of the younger one, who dared to challenge him directly with the sword. The two clashed violently in the middle of the courtyard, with Myung shouting that was exactly what he wanted. The little junior who talked with Young revealed excited that senior Myung already won most of their fights. The boy celebrated confident in the victory, while the protagonist thought that not even mortal enemies would fight so frequently. While observing the duel, Young realized that for having learned martial arts, he now managed to see everything with clarity. The protagonist noted with surprise that unlike his previous life, he managed to follow each detail of the combat. He analyzed closely the footwork of the two fighters and realized that the movements were based on the blue cloud steps. With that knowledge, he managed to predict which would be the next attack of each one, and who would win the dispute. The two dealt powerful blows at the same time in a clash that, according to the youth's prediction, would define the winner. Myung was thrown far and fell on his back on the ground after being hit by a fast and extremely precise blow. Myung pointed his wooden sword at the fallen opponent, who breathed with extreme difficulty after the impact. Tired, the boy ordered the defeated adversary to get out of his front, declaring his absolute victory in that clash. Suddenly, another disciple of the rival group approached, saying that the senior was a little too curt with the defeated one. The youth called Myung and positioned himself in an imposing way, facing Myung with a quite provocative look. He challenged the younger one, asking if he couldn't also teach him a practical lesson of martial arts. Right after, Myung accepted the new challenge promptly and prepared his sword with a fast and threatening spin under everyone's eyes. The little senior stated with determination that he would do that with all the pleasure, preparing himself to start the next duel. Young watched everything, resting his face on his hand, thinking that little boy really lived in a very intense way. The protagonist knew that Myung must already be exhausted and wondered where he managed to pull so much willpower from. Myung advanced with extreme speed, dealing a powerful blow from top to bottom against the small adversary. Myung's wooden sword was thrown far and fell to the ground, marking the first defeat of the protagonist's group. Myung pointed his weapon directly at the neck of the little senior, who accepted the defeat with a frustrated look. The winner smiled in a proud way, while another little senior made himself available to continue the sequence of combats. Myung drew his wooden sword and entered the arena, challenging the rival to the next round of that dispute. The little boy provoked him, asking if he planned to run, right after beating Myung, who was already totally exhausted. Myung smiled at the corner and told him to stop talking nonsense and come soon to the combat without losing another second. The two little warriors clashed their swords with extreme violence in an incredibly disputed start of duel. Sitting at the corner of the courtyard, Young realized bored that the two groups started a classic survival dispute. The protagonist noted that although Myung managed to win some rivals, the rest of his group was still very weak. He knew that apart from the two most experienced on his side, the rest of his seniors were just defenseless little children. Young analyzed the following fights and noted that the difference in age and size made a brutal difference in the combats. He realized, worried, that unless someone very strong appeared to intervene, the result of that battle would be tragic. One more of his small companions was defeated and fell on the ground under the totally disbelieved look of the protagonist. Myung walked calmly and approached Young, who continued sitting on the stone steps observing everything. The brute positioned himself before the youth, facing him from above with a totally victorious and intimidating look. He gave a malicious laugh and said that now, finally, he could apply a severe punishment on the insolent secular disciple. Young looked up with disdain, remembering that the little seniors started that fight just to try to protect him. Seeing the little bruised boys, the youth admitted to himself that he would feel a little guilty if things ended like that. He stood up suddenly and challenged Myohan, asking for the big guy to teach him a combat movement too. The protagonist placed himself before the adversary, who backed off a step, quite surprised with that unexpected audacity. Why? Young faced him back with mockery and asked in a provocative way if the big guy by chance was afraid of him. Myohan recovered the posture and warned that if he kneeled now, everything would be forgotten as mere foolishness of a newcomer. The youth sighed and replied with total disdain, saying that generous proposal was just a big nonsense. Irritated, the brute clenched his fists, saying the youth refused the courtesy and preferred to receive a severe punishment. Why? Young mocked the rival's old appearance, saying that even an inn servant would doubt he was a child. Completely furious, the rival tried to land a violent punch, but the protagonist dodged easily with great agility. The aggressor gritted his teeth in pure anger upon seeing that his very strong attack went far from hitting the desired target. Myohan continued dealing fast blows in the air, while the youth dodged each of them with extreme ease. The protagonist smiled at the corner, revealing that he would never enter a dispute like that without having a good strategic plan. He reflected that although the martial level of the others was superior, his knowledge to read techniques was much better. The youth thought that differential existed because he spent much more time of his life watching diverse combats. He lowered himself quickly, escaping one more punch, and remembered that all the rival's attacks used the blue cloud steps. Since he mastered perfect that same movement technique, he managed to see with clarity each of the opponent's blows. Myohan let out a grunt of frustration upon realizing that he didn't manage to even touch the agile opponent's clothes. The brute stopped the attack for an instant and looked around completely confused with the turn the fight was taking. He realized that Young's punch didn't hit him for real and that the youth himself ended up falling in a clumsy way. Protagonist supported his hands on the ground, trembling from exhaustion, while the rival watched him from afar without understanding anything. Young looked at his own red and painful fist, realizing scared that he calculated very badly his resistance. The opponent set off to attack again, while the youth recognized that reading the rival's movements still wasn't enough. He tried to defend himself from the heavy blows, realizing that just dodging wouldn't guarantee his survival for much longer. He remembered that the others trained their physique for years, while he was just an ordinary man who barely managed to dodge. The protagonist knew that the rival's stamina was much bigger, and that if he was hit squarely a single time, he would be finished. Faced with the dangerous and dead-end situation, he realized he needed to take a drastic decision to end the combat. The two faced each other with extreme seriousness, concentrating all their attention for the next and decisive movement. Young jumped toward the opponent, wondering mentally if he really should risk everything in a bet. The youth closed his eyes and prepared his fist, approaching dangerously to the devastating attack coming in his direction. Myohan's heavy fist passed grazing the protagonist's face, raising a strong wind gust in the arena. The rival widened his eyes confused, because he was sure that the two would end up hitting each other mutually at that moment. He wondered why the youth decided to dodge in such a risky way, while he watched the youth fly backward in the courtyard. Young was thrown far, spitting a bit of saliva and making a dramatic expression of someone who was knocked out. The little seniors watched the scene completely shocked and worried about the terrible state of the new companion. The protagonist fell with a thundering impact on the stone ground, raising a big dust cloud around the courtyard. He remained stretched motionless face down on the soil, while the opponent watched him from afar, trying to understand what happened. Myohan looked scared at his own hands and realized confused that his final blow didn't even manage to touch the boy. A Wudang disciple falls hard onto the courtyard ground, leaving the other boy completely speechless at the scene. The attacker looks at his own hands, completely confused and unable to believe his strike missed. Soon, he lets out an indignant yell, questioning what that rookie thinks he is doing. Two sect disciples quickly appear in the courtyard and observe the state the boy is in. The man leading their arrival, with a furious expression, repeats the question about the boy's behavior. The disciple on the ground tries to explain himself, stuttering under the pressure of the seniors glaring at him. At that moment, a man's hand suddenly rests on the boy's head. He realizes the master has just arrived at the scene, interrupting the confrontation with his imposing presence. The master mentions that, upon hearing the commotion, he rushed over to see what was going on. Meanwhile, the other boy is helped up, supported by a peer who shows concern for him. The young man who was hit lets out a heavy sigh, looking dazed by the incident as he is held up. The master, staying calm, observes the situation and concludes that it was nothing more than a little scuffle between children. Annoyed by the master's definition, the boy who took the hit reacts, asking if that could really be called a scuffle. He points to his own bruised nose, arguing that it is unfair for a martial artist to strike someone without training. The senior, with an icy glare, ignores the complaint and coldly orders him to apologize. The command is clear and direct, demanding that the apology happen immediately in front of everyone. The young man reflects, rubbing his face, that the animosity between the two groups is much bigger than he imagined. He ponders that, even though he lacks martial arts training, he did not expect the senior to be so aggressive with his words. The master, out of patience, clenches his jaw, showing he will not accept any resistance to his decision. He places his hand on the disciple's shoulder and repeats the command, forcing him to apologize. The disciple, displeased, mumbles an apology, while the other boy watches him from the ground. After the apology, the master turns his back without hesitation, giving the order for them to leave. Before leaving, the young man, still on the ground, asks for permission to say something before they depart. The master and the disciples stop, turning back to the boy who raises his hand to speak. He asks if they are not going to ask what the victim of the strike thinks about this whole situation. The master, maintaining his stern posture, retorts by asking what else he intends to demand after the apology. The boy laughs, lightening the mood, and says he does not want much, just some compensation. He gestures, asking for a sum of money to cover his medical expenses. Surprised by the audacity of the request, the senior watches the scene while the boy insists on 2 silver coins. The senior sarcastically asks if the amount is not excessive, while the boy defends his request. The scene shows a scale, highlighting how the requested amount is, in fact, quite high. The boy insists, backing the senior into a corner, saying he would not want to look cheap. Finally, he receives the money in his hands and celebrates the payment. The master asks his name, and the boy introduces himself as Manhwa Young. The senior takes a step forward, ending the conversation with a heavy attitude. He warns that he will remember the boy's name, walking away with his group of disciples. Wei puts the money in his pouch while his peer watches him, seemingly impressed by the situation. The peer tries to grab the pouch, saying he will take care of the money, but Young pulls it back indignantly. He complains that this money was the result of his hard work, warning no one to try anything. The peer comments, impressed, that Young's acting was actually really good. He admits he has never seen someone fly and the ground like that, asking how he did it. Why? Young reveals that he watched everything from the start, suggesting the other could have intervened sooner. He explains he made it clear he was there just for the moment his peer finally took action. The peer asks if he is not embarrassed, considering he could not land a single hit on his opponent. Why Young, cleaning his ear, answers casually that he has absolutely no reason to be embarrassed. He argues that since he is not a martial artist, the outcome was perfectly expected. The senior, now a bit farther away, gestures sharply, saying he still needs to teach the boy some manners. Why Young, watching the senior walk away, mutters that he prefers to stay far away from martial world etiquette. A heavy impact strikes the ground, kicking up dust and confirming the tension in the air. The senior, with an enigmatic expression, reflects that saying you are not a martial artist does not change reality. The senior warns he will teach the boy some manners, telling him not to tense up. With a precise strike, he hits a critical point on the young man's body, who drops to the ground immediately. Wai Young, sprawled on the ground, begs him to wait and stop. From that day on, Wai Young had to include rigorous training with Chiangwa in his daily routine. The training consisted of heavy physical conditioning, all under Chiangwa's constant and relentless supervision. As soon as the exercise ended, the young man received a harsh lesson that left him nearly passed out. The master wiped away sweat with a smile, finding the method refreshing and relaxing. Unlike Cheong Su, whose strikes faded quickly, the pain caused by Chiangwa lingered for half a day. Ho Yaeng endured it for a few days, but feeling he was at his limit, decides to use the system shop. He wanted to save up for something better, but could no longer handle Chiangwa's ruthless fists. Thanks to the intense training, many talents were unlocked, and he reaches out to the interface. With the 2 silver coins he managed to get out of Cheonju, he feels he can finally buy something. Wai Young selects the desired talent, convinced that this choice will help him survive. The glow of the coins disappears as the transaction is processed by the system. The purchase is complete, and Wai Young feels he has finally found the solution he needed so badly. Chiangwa appears before him with a serene expression and a calm smile. He watches Wai Young, who is training with dumbbells, and comments that the boy is starting to look like a warrior. Chiangwa asks if Wai Young can already feel the results of all that physical effort. Hui Young replies that he feels nothing, only the burden of an exhausting daily workout. The master laments the young man's lack of perception, hoping he would learn to enjoy his own progress. Chiangwa clenches his fist, indicating it is time to start the practical part of the training. He warns the boy not to tense up, because if he does, one strike will end up turning into 2. A powerful impact occurs as Chiangwa lands a direct hit on Hui Young's body. Wai Young feels the blow, letting out a grunt of pain in the face of the master's overwhelming strength. Despite the intensity, he realizes that, as expected, his body managed to withstand the impact. He celebrates having bought the resilient body talent, which proved to be worth every single silver coin invested. The performance of the level 8 talent completely exceeded his expectations during the fight. Hui Young reflects that maybe he does not need expensive talents, and just stacking several low-level ones will do. He smiles, believing that with these level 8 and 9 talents, he can become the greatest in the martial world. Chiangwa, noticing the change, asks in confusion why the boy suddenly became so tough. Unbothered, the master continues the training, launching new strikes at the boy waiting on the ground. He laughs, saying that if Hui Young's body has gotten stiffer, he can just hit harder too. Wai Young stares at Chiangwa's fist, and an inconvenient memory comes to mind. He recalls that, even though the prices are low, every cheap choice has a hidden reason. Outside, one of the younger disciples watches the scene curiously from behind the low wall. The kid asks if his junior is okay. Young, exhausted, answers that he is not okay at all. The little one suggests that if the pain gets unbearable, he should try screaming, as that sometimes makes the master take it easy. When the boy offers to step in for him, Young refuses, fearing that will only make things worse. The kid waves goodbye, wishing him a good trip, while Wai Young heads toward the treasure pavilion. Wei Young goes on his way, keeping a serious face as he thinks about the challenges in the sect. The younger disciple watches from afar, commenting to himself that the master gives the junior extra attention because they are close. Wai Young walking through the courtyard sighs, feeling he needs to find a way out of Wudong soon. Upon arriving at the place, the pavilion manager says there is nothing for him to do today and tells him to leave. Ho Young insists on getting some work, but is scolded and sent back to archery practice. The boy listens to the order in silence, showing his displeasure with the situation. He pleads and clings to the master, begging to stop the training, but receives an order to get out. Wai Young stops, gathers his courage, and asks for permission to speak about an urgent matter. The master asks what it is about, while Wai Young explains about the Yiching market and the escort request. Curious, the master asks the size of the market, and Young reveals the existence of 50 stalls. The master ponders that, being a large and profitable event, it makes perfect sense for the merchants to trust Wuding. The treasure pavilion master calculates that 10 men are enough and asks what the financial offer is. He comments that the Shanxi merchants have plenty of resources and Wei Young, sitting on the floor, calls them greedy. Wei Young is shocked by the news that they will charge 10 silver taels per person, labeling them as thieves. The pavilion master decides to use the opportunity to buy that year's salt, asking for details about the price. Wei Young loses his composure and yells at the master, outraged by the lack of economic sense in that decision. The master gets annoyed by the young man's attitude, and Wei Young, startled, apologizes for the sudden outburst of anger. Irritated, the master questions how such a young boy could understand pricing, making Wei Young remember his regression. Even so, the youth insists that the right price for salt should be half of what is being proposed. Wei Young reflects to himself, trying to identify what he is missing about this suspicious transaction. The boy realizes they are in a time right before the reform of the salt distribution system. In the past, you needed a specific license, the salt permit, which could only be obtained at the northern border. Due to the difficulty of getting supplies to the border, the merchants who traveled there received special privileges in return. Because of this, the border regions became the distribution hub, with merchants spreading the product throughout the land. This old system, known as the open center method, was eventually abolished and replaced by a new one. The new centralized management model became known as the folded color system. This system consisted of gathering all the salt in inland offices for sale under central government management. Young does not know the exact reason for the abolition, but watches the master overwhelmed by the new guidelines. He suspects the government used the merchants' tax evasion as a reason to strip them of their privileges all at once. The crucial point was that as soon as salt became accessible to everyone, its price would drop drastically. Young knows from personal experience that the value of salt will fall to less than half its current price. The pavilion master analyzes the situation and asks what the best strategy to follow now would be. The young man realizes the implementation of the new system is imminent and will bring huge financial losses for Wuding. He understands the Shanxi merchants already know about the change and are offering discounts to dump their inventory. The pavilion master taps Wei Young on the shoulder, demanding his attention so he can explain himself. Why? Young admits he could not stay silent watching a disaster happen right before his eyes. The master asks what he really understands about the situation, questioning his perspective on this business opportunity. Why? Young fires back by asking if it is not suspicious for usually greedy merchants to offer such generous discounts all of a sudden. The master calls the observation pure speculation, insisting that profit is the only goal of any merchant. Wei Young argues that, even though he hates speaking ill of merchants, this is the only way to prevent a fatal mistake. The master crosses his arms, challenging the boy to take full responsibility for his words in front of everyone. Young accepts the challenge without hesitation, confident he can answer for the consequences of his warning. He dreams of the recognition he will get when the new system is implemented and everyone sees his brilliance. Wei Young makes a joke about his own name, which means bright light. Anticipating the success that will come, the master interrupts him, ordering him to prove his claims directly to the sect leader. Wei Young is shocked, stuttering as he confirms if he must present his case before such a high authority. The young man stays silent, processing the gravity of the situation he just got himself into. He walks up to the sect leader, feeling the weight of the responsibility of his report. The sect leader, known as the Taiji Sword Emperor, watches the boy with a stern gaze. The pavilion master scolds Wei Young for his lack of respect and caution in front of an elder. He provokes the boy, wanting to see if his arrogance holds up in the leader's presence. The sect leader recognizes the young man, mentioning that Qianhua had already spoken about him before. He admits he still does not see anything special about Wei Young, but trusts the master's judgment. The leader orders the treasure pavilion master to explain the reasons for not buying the salt in Yiqing. The pavilion master tries to dodge the question, but the leader insists he must present the department's opinion. The leader emphasizes that it is the pavilion master's duty to report the information clearly and with good reasoning. The pavilion master is pressured to speak under the threat of being held responsible for his unfounded opinions. Yayoung tries to step in, nervous, realizing the situation is slipping completely out of his control. He takes a deep breath, trying to regain his calm and organize his thoughts, so he does not lose his way. Why? Young speaks up, stating clearly to the leader that he is not part of the treasure pavilion. The sect leader ignores the protest, declaring that the boy is considered part of the department for that purpose. Young states that this situation is not something he really wanted. The sect leader, known as the Taiji Sword Emperor, just observes the youth with an intense, silent gaze. The pavilion master, intrigued by the boy's reasoning, finally decides to let Young speak directly. He argues that opportunities to get cheaper salt from Shanxi merchants do not come around often, and that others will surely buy futures contracts. The sect leader, losing his patience with a hesitation, asks why. Young insists on blocking that important purchase. Why? Young corrects the leader, stating with absolute confidence that they have plenty of time to decide. The youth reveals, with a cunning smile, that none of the major groups, including the Huzhou merchants, will take part in this deal. The sect leader narrows his eyes and demands that Young present the basis for such a bold claim. Young suggests that the leader ask a secular disciple who belongs to a Huzhou merchant family directly. The sect leader identifies the boy as being from the Yeo clan and orders Chiangsu to go get him immediately. Chiangsu rushes out to fulfill the order, while Young calmly waits for the disciple's arrival. A short time later, the disciple named Yeo Young shows up, still a bit nervous after being summoned. He gives a respectful bow before the sect leader, introducing himself formally. The sect leader asks directly about the rumors surrounding the Yiqing market. Yin confirms that, indeed, the Huzhou merchants do not intend to participate in the negotiations this time. The sect leader questions the reason, since it is a large market with 50 active stalls. Yang explains that, as far as he knows, none of the 15 Huzhou clans plan to enter the Yiqing market. The sect leader stays silent, processing the information that has just been confirmed. After receiving the answer, the leader dismisses Young, who leaves the room, leaving Young alone with the authority. Young reflects that he suddenly begins to understand Chiamwa's strategic vision. He remembers a saying about a child walking toward a well and realizes the danger the sect was in. The young man wonders if that was exactly how Chiangwa felt when trying to block his path in the past. Young thinks that deep down, he would have preferred to be ignorant about Wudong's finances, so he would not have to deal with this burden. He looks at the sect leader and feels that seeing Wudong heading toward a loss is like watching a child getting close to danger. The leader, with a piercing look, asks how Young gained knowledge about such market matters. Young answers with a calm smile that, at heart, he is a merchant and cannot reveal trade secrets. He guarantees the salt deal will fail and strongly recommends the sect wait to buy later. The sect leader, convinced by the warning, decides to cancel the purchase of salt futures. He orders Young and Chiangsu to go to the market and buy the salt in person when necessary. Young is startled, clarifying that his intention was not just to cancel the futures, but to not buy anything at all right now. The sect leader places his hand on Young's shoulder, making it clear that going to the market is his mission. Young, taken by surprise, can barely believe what he just heard. The pressure the sect leader puts on the young man is immense, looming over him like a towering shadow. The leader orders him to go to the market with Chiangshu and bring back the salt. He warns that, since the boy acted so confident, he must buy the product below market price or face punishment. Young protests indignantly, asking how that demand could be considered remotely fair. He complains about the difficulty of waiting and the impossibility of getting lower prices from Shanxi merchants. The sect leader replies, reminding him that the goal of trading salt is not just to fund the sect's operations. He explains the real purpose is to ensure a stable supply for Hubei province and maintain the people's livelihood. The leader accuses Young of making the sect lose the chance to buy cheap because of his unproven claim. He provokes the youth, questioning if he really has the talent for negotiations that he claims to have. Young, annoyed by the provocation, feels his reputation is is on the line and decides to accept the challenge. The sect leader watches out Wei Young, curious to see how he intends to negotiate on behalf of the sect. The leader agrees that if he gets the discount, he will be financially rewarded. He promises to give Wei Young 1% of the difference if he manages to buy the salt below the current rate. Wei Young starts calculating profit margins in his head, entirely focused on the numbers. He asks for 10%, the leader offers 3%, and after a tense negotiation, they settle on 5%. Wei Young celebrates securing the 5%, feeling victorious. He confirms that if he manages to buy the salt for under 10 taels per 30 bushels, he will be entitled to the agreed cut. The youth clenches his fist with determination, ready to profit immensely from the opportunity he created. Wei Young emphatically demands that the leader keep his word on the financial arrangement. A loud bang ends the discussion, sealing the decision regarding the salt purchase. The pavilion master, still doubtful, asks if the leader is really okay with this risky arrangement. The master, intrigued, asks how the leader knew what Wei Young was so interested in money. The leader closes his eyes, maintaining his enigmatic posture and without giving a direct answer. He simply comments that someone who calls himself a merchant would hardly turn down a good amount of cash. Young, now out of the room, meets up with his peers in the courtyard and seems to be in a good mood. One of his peers plays a grass flute, greeting the young man with the shrill sound. The peer asks why he is not in the main pavilion, if he was supposed to be there. Young Pang Pant ignores the question and asks if there are any Shanxi merchants around. The peer answers with confusion, doubting that a merchant from that region would come all the way to Wuding to become a disciple. Other disciples overhear the conversation, showing interest and surprise at the boy's words. Wei Young reiterates that he just wanted to make sure, but the peer insists on knowing the reason for his concern. Wei Young reveals that the Shanxi merchants plan to sell salt at the Yiqing market. The peer, with a blade of grass in his mouth, says that their salt trade in Jiangnan is nothing new. Wei Young clenches his fist tightly, frustrated that no one notices the trap. He declares loud and clear that this whole deal is just one big scam. The peer's eyes widen, surprised by the young man's categorical statement. He grits his teeth, visibly tense at the possibility of them being tricked. The peer asks, outraged, if the Shanxi merchants plan to pull a scam using salt of all things. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the peer lowers his head, shocked by the audacity of the target. The other disciples start yelling, wanting to confront the merchants before they get robbed. Wei Young smiles in satisfaction upon noticing the weight the merchants' names carry among the people. He reflects that, in the business world, tricking other merchants is common, but attacking your own is different. Wei Young notes that, although they seem to worship only money, merchants hold affection for their lands. He concludes that the locals are the first to react when someone tries to exploit the region. Wei Young understands that defending their homeland is a cause that mobilizes local merchants. The peer, still nervous, agrees that local losses are reason enough for a forceful reaction. He asks how exactly the Shanxi merchants intend to pull off the scam against them. Wei Young stomps his foot, ready to explain that the people will not let themselves be easily fooled. The peer looks at Wei Young, suddenly seeming to recognize him as someone more important. Hong Yang approaches Wei Young, walking with a thoughtful posture. Hong Yang asks to speak with Wei Young privately for a moment. The two step away to a secluded corner of the courtyard to talk without being overheard. Hong Yang asks, surprised, how Wei knew so much about the secrets of that trade. Wei Young plays it off, initially pretending not to understand what he is talking about. Wei Young asks if he found out that the open center method would be abolished. Hong Yang goes pale, clearly affected by the young man's direct revelation of the secret. Wei Young realizes that all of Hong Yang's timid behavior was just an act. Hong Yang deduces that Wei Young must be a royal descendant to have access to such highly classified information. He admits he suspected something, but never imagined the boy would know so many details. Hong Yang emphasizes that not even the officials in Beijing are aware of this change yet. He asks who Wei Young's powerful backer might be, to which the boy denies having any support. Hong Yang observes Wei Young closely, trying to decipher his true intentions. Wei Young says he is not obligated to tell the truth, pointing out that secrecy is a merchant's weapon. He challenges Hong Yang, asking what he thinks of that short and direct answer. Hong Young bursts into laughter, impressed by Wei Young's firm attitude. He comments he never thought he would hear his father's lessons coming from someone else's mouth. Wei Young admits he is also a merchant's son and that he learned a lot by observing. Wei Young invites Hong Young to help, but the boy refuses right away, wanting to keep his distance from the trouble. Wei Young asks the reason for his decision, since the elders apparently had already sealed a deal. The deal was sealed with a handshake, making it official that the Huzhou merchants would turn a blind eye to the profits of the Shanxi ones. Wei Young accepts the situation with a shrug, acknowledging there is little to be done now. The peer, surprised, watches how the boy handles the news so calmly. Hu Young argues that the attitude makes sense, because the Huzhou merchants surely gain something in return. He analyzes the situation with a sharp eye, trying to understand what is behind that alliance. Wei Young suggests that the price for their silence was ignoring their illegal smuggling routes, leaving the peer in shock. The peer puts a hand to his head, baffled by the young man's level of knowledge and keen insight. Young wonders if he should reveal his regression to put an end to that mysterious conversation once and for all. He plays it off, reminding him that a merchant's secret weapon should never be revealed so easily. The peer is impressed by the boy's refusal to accept the offered fortune, praising his principles. They agree that in the business world, one side's profit always means another side's loss. The peer asks what Wei Young's real interest is in trying to mess with the Shanxi merchants. Wei Young replies that the sect leader ordered him to buy the salt personally after his warnings. He explains that, even though he caused the leader some annoyance, the negotiation will guarantee him a percentage of the profits. Wei Young proposes telling his plan to his peer, promising that he will keep the secret under wraps. He leans in and whispers something in the peer's ear, who listens with extreme attention. The peer closes his eyes, expressing the massive effort he is making to understand the complex plan. Suddenly, they spot Saganayan approaching, which instantly kills the mood of the conversation. Saganayan, with an intimidating smile, announces that he will also join the mission alongside Wei Young. He demands to know what the two boys were planning, whispering in the corner of the courtyard. Wei Young, unfazed, asks why Saganayan cares so much if he is not even part of the mission. Saganayan reveals his group was also assigned to the escort duty, demanding immediate answers about the plan. He threatens to spread rumors about Wei Young's conspiracy to the council if he does not get the truth. Wei Young acknowledges that, despite the childish threat, this situation could bring him big problems in the future. He looks at the peer, hinting that now the issue has become everyone's problem. The group walks through the courtyard, feeling the burden of the new, unwanted company that will follow them on the journey. The peer tries to argue that the Sungro faction should not get involved in Sang Wang's business. Sagongayon interrupts the conversation, suggesting that perhaps the situation is different from what they think. He accuses the group of looking down on the Yeo clan and Hong Young, challenging them to face the consequences of their words. Saganayan looks startled, wondering what Hong Yang is hiding behind that serious expression. He realizes that when someone has nothing to hide, they end up showing their true and fearsome strength. Saganayan leaves quickly, leaving the other three in silence after the unexpected confrontation. The peer asks what happened, and Wei Young explains he had a hard time getting rid of Saganayan. How Wei Young celebrates successfully, keeping that annoying group away for a good while. The peer watches with some apprehension as Wei Young's expression drastically changes as the situation requires. The peer asks again what Wei Young's plan for the Yiching market is. They gather in a circle to continue the conversation in low voices and avoid any new interruptions. Hong Young, after hearing the proposal, agrees that Wei Young's strategy is worth a try. The other peers enthusiastically agree, thinking the plan will be extremely fun to carry out. Wei Young flashes a mischievous smile, assuring them that the mission will be, above all, very enjoyable. The group finally arrives at the Yiching market, where a crowd keeps the local commerce bustling. Ho Young, used to the silence of the sect, comments that the place is too noisy for his liking. The peer looks around lost, asking where on earth the salt market is in that vastness. Why? Young casually answers that the salt's selling spot is usually in the heart of the market. The peer comments on how good it feels to be out of the paperwork routine, but reminds Why Young of his official cover. Oh boy. Young ignores the criticism, suggesting they enjoy the view while they walk through the busy local commerce. The peer questions what Why Young meant by his last statement, looking for a clear explanation. Why Young points to the salt warehouses, declaring that in that place, the merchants rule like true kings. The peer listens to the remark with suspicion, keeping a close eye on the boy's behavior. Kang-san, a Shanxi merchant, warmly greets the Wuding group led by Chiang-su. He notes the safe arrival of the requested disciples, but his expression changes when he asks about the treasure pavilion master's presence. Kang-san asks, with a tone that carries a certain hidden hostility, the reason Chiang-su came to the market personally. Chiang-su clarifies they are there to buy salt, stressing they never promised not to buy the product, only avoided the future's contracts. The merchant, maintaining a confident posture with crossed arms, asks how he can assist them with an immediate purchase. Kang Sound is firm in stating that he will not grant any discount on the final price of the salt. He warns that by buying now, they will pay a much higher price than they would have paid with the future's contracts. Kang San stares at Chiang-su, expecting to see a reaction to the financial disadvantage he just imposed. Who intimidated? Chiang-su replies that, despite everything, they still intend to close the purchase at a low price. The merchant finds the mention of Kui Young as an inner disciple of Wudang strange and questions what it means. Huh? Young explains he gave the merchant some valuable advice, because nothing in the world is done without a specific reason. The merchant remains silent, processing the statement, while looking at the youth with suspicion. Why Young, with an enigmatic smile, suggests that the open center method is about to be abolished. Kang San goes into total shock, yelling in outrage upon hearing the revelation Young just dropped. He panics upon realizing that, with the method's abolition, the price of salt will plummet and ruin his inventory. Chiang-su uses the moment to mock the merchant, highlighting his speed in calculating losses and his despair. The merchant desperately tries to justify himself, begging them not to jump to hasty conclusions. He claims the information about the system change is just baseless rumors floating around Beijing. Kang San insists the matter is still under review and that, as long as the old system is in place, he is not charging anything extra. Wei Young observes the merchant, confirming to Chiang-su that what the man said is technically true. He notes that since the system has not been officially abolished yet, the merchant is only selling at the official price. Chiang-su complains that the merchant could have at least warned them about the instability, even indirectly. Kang San warns that spreading rumors like that could bring retaliation from the imperial palace against the Wudang sect. He defends that a merchant's job is to sell for the highest price possible, asking for understanding. Wei Young asks if, in light of this, there is nothing they can do to improve the deal. Chiang-su decides it is better to end the conversation there and leave the area. As they walk away, Chiang-su questions Young's plan, fearing the system's abolition will be applied retroactively. He is annoyed that he was not informed about this open center system issue much earlier. Wei Young answers that Chiang-su was too busy being polite to that merchant. He argues that by playing fair, the merchant will remember him as a reasonable client in the future. Wei Young believes that, by acting this way, he greatly increased the chances that the merchant will want to do business only with him. The merchant, watching the two walk away, reflects this was why they did not send him to Dongbei. Suddenly a well-aimed strike hits Wei Young, who lets out a yelp of pain. Chiang-su, holding a cup, comments that the boy has an annoying talent for provoking people. Wei Young, while eating a dumpling, replies that a true merchant knows exactly how to exploit others' weak points. Chiang-su asks what the next step is, and Wei Young suggests they just wait out the next 4 days. Chiang-su asks what he plans to do while the market is in full swing. Wei Young suggests taking a stroll around the market, but keeps the mystery alive about any hidden tricks. He points to a stall ahead, suggesting the pavilion master buy him something simple. Hwa-young asks for a broom, leaving Cheong-su visibly confused by the unusual request. Cheong-su closes his eyes, maintaining a look of disapproval at his disciple's attitude. A fist clenches tightly, showing Cheong-su's impatience with the jokes. The mood in the market courtyard seems tense as they keep walking. They arrive at a fine fabric store, displaying colorful, high-quality pieces. The shopkeeper praises the softness of the fabrics, guaranteeing that everything there is certified high quality. Young touches one of the fabrics, carefully feeling the texture of the material. He admits that, despite everything, the quality of what is being sold there is truly exceptional. The shopkeeper promises they will not find anything better anywhere, but Young prefers to look around a bit more. Cheong-su shoots him a look of disdain, feeling he wasted time with that visit. Cheong-su asks if the boy plans to spend the whole day window shopping, to which Young replies by asking if he didn't notice anything odd. The treasure pavilion master looks at Young and asks what exactly he was supposed to have noticed. Why? Young keeps a confident smile, knowing his observation is the key point of the matter. He explains that the market commissioner is the official in charge of overseeing all local activities. The young man points out that every product sold must mandatorily be inspected and approved by this commissioner. Why? Young describes how the commissioner assigns each merchant a specific spot in the market based on the quality of their goods. He notes that if the commissioner were corrupt, he could easily take bribes to classify bad products as high quality. Young surveys surroundings and comments that clearly that is not the kind of corruption happening here. He admires the commissioner's competence, whose judgment of quality is extremely sharp and incorruptible. Young picks up a sword and inspects it, realizing that the piece's quality gives away a crucial clue. He asks Cheong-su to buy the sword for him, even noting that the item seems quite expensive. Young insists the sword is a necessary investment as capital for the upcoming negotiations. Cheong-su hands over the request of his money so the youth can finalize the purchase of the metal piece. Young puts the sword away, pleased with the acquisition while Cheong-su watches him closely. He talks to Cheong-su again, asking the pavilion master to listen carefully. Young asks if Cheong-su agrees that the market commissioner is a capable and impartial man, points out that the store where he bought the sword is in a prime location, yet sells products of varying qualities. Young questions why such an efficient commissioner would make a decision that clearly hurts the market's overall profit. A smile appears on the young man's face, indicating he finally cracked the puzzle. He states that the answer to this question is directly tied to who forged that specific blade. Cheong-su inspects the sword, starting to understand that the craftsman behind it is the main clue. Cheong-su examines the weapon with a sharp eye, searching for any detail he might have missed. Reading the inscription on the blade, the name Yi-Jong is revealed, leaving Cheong-su surprised. Young reveals that he is a renowned blacksmith from Beijing, but the most important point is something else. He points out the city of Yicheng itself, indicating that the artisan's origin is the key to everything. Young suggests the market commissioner is deliberately favoring local Yicheng merchants. Cheong-su realizes that, if so, the commissioner is not as impartial as he seemed. Young comments that the sword is the perfect gift to win this official's goodwill. Young argues that a luxurious gift is the best way to earn the commissioner's trust, even if it feels like a bribe. Cheong-su keeps a serious face, weighing the implications of the young man's proposed strategy. He admits, albeit reluctantly, Young's nose for business is impressive. They arrive at the commissioner's residence, sensing the honor of being hosted by the official in charge of the sector. The commissioner examines the sword and immediately recognizes it was made by Master Yi-Jong. He remarks that a piece of that quality costs a fortune, but Young assures him it is merely a token of sincerity. Young takes the lead in the conversation, asking for permission to discuss the state of the salt market. The commissioner reveals he is already aware of the abolition of the distribution system and the upcoming changes. He reassures the visitors, guaranteeing he keeps tight control over all brokers in the market. The commissioner states that all brokers are Yicheng natives and will not allow outside interference with local prices. Young smiles on the inside, aware that local control is what guarantees stability. He explains that, even though they come from the Central Plains, brokers are essential to smooth out regional differences. Why? Young knows that if the brokers complicate the process, the situation could become unsustainable. He comments that even though Shanxi merchants try offering bribes, the commissioner's stance prevents that from happening. Young waits in a room as he hears a knock at the door, signaling an interruption. Cheongsu comes in and reports that a disgruntled merchant is causing a scene outside. The commissioner excuses himself to resolve the issue, telling them to make themselves at home. The door closes, leaving Young and Cheongsu alone in the room. Young whistles calmly as he waits for the commissioner's return to resume negotiations. Cheongsu warns again that the boy should have avoided mentioning the distribution system so openly. Young explains he just meant they shouldn't discuss such matters so publicly. He thinks about it, realizing that from a new angle, the situation might actually be an advantage. Young concludes there will be no problem at all if the information leaks indirectly. Many of Wudong's secular disciples are active in commerce, making them valuable assets to the sect. Young notices that by giving a subtle hint, everyone involved acted in perfect sync for local interests. The young man watches the tea being served, surprised to see the brokers themselves stepping into the situation. He sighs, wishing he had known that, so he could have spent his money on a proper banquet instead of bribes. A sharp knock echoes, signaling that something unexpected is about to happen. Cheongsu invites Young outside, noticing that things are not going according to plan. Both run across the courtyard, rushing to check out the new threat that has emerged. Cheongsu orders Young to look at what is happening on the other side. Young gazes into the distance, trying to spot who is causing the commotion. The youth's eyes narrow as he recognizes a familiar face among the troublemakers. He sighs, annoyed to realize he will have to deal with a complicated, persistent fate once again. Cheongsu asks if the people causing trouble belong to an orthodox sect or not. Young states with certainty that they are from an orthodox sect, even if their appearance suggests otherwise. He explains he knew for sure when he recognized a specific face among the troublemakers. Young comes face to face with Saganayan, furious to see him crossing his path yet again. He remembers that Saganayan stormed off angrily, right after his confrontation with Yeohon Yang. Young understands that, after seeing the true face of the royal descendant, Saganayan could not stick around. He wonders how that man ended up taking an escort job for the Shanxi merchants. Saganayan lets out an explosive shout, ordering Young to shut up immediately. Saganayan complains that while the authorities are lenient with the locals, their current attitude stops them from trading. The Wudong official fires back with sarcasm, denying any intention of obstructing the merchants' business. Saganayan, shaking with anger, demands they show proof before accusing an imperial official. The official replies that, if that is the case, he fully understands Saganayan's position. Saganayan threatens to negotiate directly with the government, claiming the Shanxi merchants also have powerful connections. He warns that if the situation escalates, it will not just be the Shanxi merchants who end up taking a loss. Young steps firmly onto the ground, approaching the argument to step into the conflict. He warns that if things keep going this way, the local merchants will be the ones losing out in the dispute. Young smiles, advising them to stay calm and stick close to the authorities for their own safety. One of the merchants glares at Young with hatred, blaming him for meddling in the negotiation. Young clarifies he has no ties to the government, nor does he officially represent Wudong's interests. He claims he is at the market solely in the capacity of a simple merchant. Young challenges the merchants, asking why they chase profits that betray the very core principles of commerce. The merchant tries to calm down, while his companion tells him not to get carried away by the youth's words. The companion states that merchants have their own laws and will not accept outside interference. Young puts a hand on the merchant's shoulder, encouraging him to maintain composure and respond carefully. A hand reaches out, suggesting a gesture of restraint during the heated argument. One of the merchants, backed by an ally, suggests a new way to settle that dispute. Young looks at the pavilion, figuring this will all end in a proxy match. He accepts the idea, suggesting they start the match right there, under the supervision of the authorities. Young and his companion exchange looks, ready for what is to come. The merchant tries to grasp what exactly this proxy match means. The narration explains this is a common method among merchants to resolve disputes with no clear outcome. Without an agreement, brute force decides who is right in the negotiation. Doubt hangs in the air about what constitutes true power in the merchant world. The answer is swift and certain to them. The ultimate power is money. Young notes that whoever has resources can hire the best experts for these matches. He shows his empty pouch, pointing out that, right now, he doesn't have a single coin. Young smiles, realizing the other merchants already know his true financial state. They whisper that the boy will not easily get Wudong's backing for something so trivial. Young decides to drop the subject, leaving one last message before moving on. Qiangzu immediately warns that if they were planning on relying on his help, they better forget about it. He turns away and makes it clear that the same warning goes for the opponent nearby. The martial artist explains that Wudong does not get involved in mundane affairs, which is why they cannot use escorts in the fight. The merchant smiles amicably and agrees he would never drag noble warriors into such a dirty brawl. He assures them he came prepared with his own escorts and presents a bald fighter ready for combat. The market official asks, worriedly, what the boy will do and offers to buy time until they find a substitute. Young immediately turns down the help, stating firmly that a real man always keeps his word. He steps forward resolutely and declares that since he came here as a merchant, he will face the challenge as one. The bald opponent smiles wickedly and confesses he was eager for the chance to give Young a severe beating. The young merchant keeps walking forward calmly, replying that this moment is absolutely perfect for that. Young says he feels the same and provokes his rival, telling him to come at him with everything. He has to see what he is really made of. A cold breeze blows through the courtyard as the two opponents stare each other down from a distance, about to begin the clash. Suddenly, the bald fighter hears someone call him vice leader and turns around, intrigued, to see who is approaching. He is surprised and asks what brought such an important person there to interrupt the match. The opponent recognizes the bearded man as the feared hall master Hong Munhak and looks at him with respect. Hong Munhak says he came after hearing the vice leader went out with a merchant, offering to fight in his place. The bald warrior smiles and comments that the kid's internal energy is almost non-existent to waste a strong blade on Young walks up laughing, saying that for a second he thought they wanted to switch fighters. He provokes the bald man, saying he thought his rival was going to chicken out, but the fighter replies he really wants to smash him into the ground. The official asks if he is sure about this, considering the opponent is the vice leader of a powerful clan and not just some random scout. The youth tells him not to worry, because taking on the bearded guy would be tough, but he can handle the bald one easily. With nothing else to do, the official closes his eyes and lets out a sigh, accepting the boy's stubborn decision. The official raises his arm in the middle of the courtyard and loudly announces he will explain the official rules of the dispute. He shouts that the losing side of the proxy match must yield to the winner's demands with no restrictions. If the other side wins, the Shanxi merchants will be able to trade tax-free and without oversight from the authorities. But if Young wins, the Shanxi rivals will have to follow all government rules without complaining. The market official clasps his hands and asks if anyone has an objection before authorizing the start. Without waiting a single second more, the match begins and Young charges toward his rival at top speed. The youth smiles confidently, remembering how he panicked last time, but noting that a real fight is decided by who strikes first. However, the bald man blocks the punch with a giant iron sword, making the clash produce a screeching sound. The young merchant freezes in terror as he sees the sharp blade pass right by his face, while the opponent smiles cruelly. The bald warrior unleashes a devastating sword strike, forcing the youth to leap backward in a hurry. Young yells in a panic, asking where that massive sword came from and accusing his opponent of cheating. The bald man chases after him laughing, saying no one banned weapons and that this great iron sword is already his. He attacks again, promising to only use the flat side of the blade, so he does not end up finishing the kid off for good. With a cold look, the fighter mocks him, saying that if the boy does not like it, he should go get a weapon for himself. Manhwa Yang is outraged, complaining about what kind of absurd and nonsensical logic that is. He dodges by rolling across the ground, yelling that he has never even held a real sword in his entire life. The spectators watch from a distance as the impact of the battle shatters parts of the courtyard's stone slabs. The overweight merchant cheers happily, shouting for his fighter to break everything in sight. The market official asks Chiangsu if they shouldn't stop this, since a mere merchant cannot win. Chiangsu answers with another question, asking if the official prefers to just watch while the people are scammed. The official tenses up and stays quiet, unsure of what to say while the Wudang master keeps sitting and watching. Chiangsu casually reveals that the boy fighting is also an official Wudang disciple. Back in the fight, the bald man brings down his massive sword, declaring that this match will not end easily. The strike hits the ground with brutal force, cracking open a crater as Manhwa Yang leaps aside to escape. The youth leans on the ground, panting and exhausted, trying to catch his breath under his opponent's wary gaze. The bald fighter rests the blade on his shoulder and mocks him, asking if running away is the only thing he trained for in life. He laughs loudly and taunts him, saying that before and even now, the boy is nothing but a scared little rat. Manhwa Yang is confused by the comment and asks what on earth that man is talking about all of a sudden. Manhwa Yang says he hasn't even been studying martial arts for a year, and that his rival should be ashamed for not landing a hit. The bald man boils with rage, hearing the kid mockingly say that the level of his sect becomes obvious when you look at its leader. On the inside, the youth knows that despite all the taunting, he is at serious risk if the fight drags on any longer. He remembers that in the past test, he couldn't hit Sagunion, and that merely dodging attacks would not win him the match. But he knows that this time, things are completely different from his last, frustrating fighting experience. The bald opponent grits his teeth furiously, his pride wounded by the boy's sharp taunts. The bearded hall master shouts frantically for the vice leader not to lose his head and act on impulse in the arena. But it is already too late, and the giant charges forward with quick, heavy steps, unleashing a fierce attack on the youth. He yells that the kid is done, for as he brings his heavy blade down with all the force of his hatred and frustration, Manhwa Yang readies his own punch with determination, knowing he now holds a very special advantage. That advantage is the resilient body talent he bought in the system shop using 2 silver coins. Yang lands a devastating, direct punch that shatters the rival's sword and knocks back his strike in one go. The bald man is completely shocked as he takes the direct impact to his face without managing to react at all. All the spectators watch, paralyzed with their mouths wide open, as the giant is sent flying in incredible fashion. The opponent's body crashes violently against the stone floor, kicking up dust and putting a definitive end to the fight. The boy reflects that, although the talent was useless against his master, against ordinary rivals he wins without a single scratch. He calmly straightens himself up and mockingly asks if they want to keep the match going with the next fighters. The official raises Manhwa Yang's hand and loudly declares his indisputable, heroic victory in the clash. The official announces that trade will now follow local rules and expects the Shaanxi folks to accept defeat with honor. The scene shifts to a few days later, showing the imposing main pavilion of the respected Wudang sect. Manhwa Yang and Chiangsu return to the pavilion and report that the difficult negotiations were successfully concluded. The sect leader listens closely to the report and praises the result, calling it simply fantastic. He says he never imagined they would save 300 silver taels compared to the previous futures contracts. Back to the narrative. Days go by as the salt deal is finalized with all parties at the market. The deal finally concludes favorably for the Wudang sect, thanks to the boy's strategy. The outcome of that entire commercial maneuver is considered incredible by all the authorities in the sect. The leader admits that saving 300 silver taels was an unprecedented feat for a beginner in commerce. The youth explains that, since transporting the salt to another market would be far too expensive, the Shaanxi rivals had to cave. With no viable options left, they were forced to sell in Yiqing, giving the massive discount on the salt purchase. Fulfilling the deal, the leader hands over the 15 silver taels, the 5% promised to the youth. The boy happily kisses the money bag while the leader says what impresses him the most is the talent behind the feat. He points out that taking down a vice leader as a rookie is something to be proud of and proves the master's good eye. He announces his intention to grant an unusual privilege, leaving Cheong-su shocked at the prospect of the decision. The leader officially appoints Mak-wi Young as an inner disciple of the main sect from that moment forward. He adds that it has been almost 50 years since a mere secular disciple received such a major promotion. The leader reinforces that the brilliant way he solved the case and proved his talent justified the exception. The leader says he has the right to be proud of Wuding, but the boy stays serious and thoughtful in the corner. The youth asks permission for a favor, and the elder willingly accepts, provided it is within his power. Hui Young thumps his chest firmly, adopting a dramatic posture before making his official statement. He formally asks to be expelled from the sect, but without having his energy danshan destroyed in the process. Silence takes over the temple as the birds sing outside, contrasting with the shock in the room. The sect leader is completely paralyzed and speechless at the boy's unusual, bold request. Cheong-su lowers his head in utter embarrassment, feeling a massive headache from his disciple's audacity. The youth confesses his true desire is to make a fortune, but the leader asks, confused, if he just wants money. He answers with the greatest shamelessness and pride in the world that he simply really loves hoarding wealth. The elder covers his face, lamenting that a cultivator should avoid the worldly life, but admits that profiting is not entirely wrong. However, the leader reminds him that the boy has already learned the secret Heavenly Cloud Steps technique of Wuding. He explains that no sect would let someone leave with their secrets without destroying their danshan or breaking their leads. The leader drums his fingers on the table, deep in thought, admitting he has never dealt with such an atypical case in his entire life. He stares thoughtfully at the boy as a new idea seems to spark in his mind to break the deadlock once and for all. The sect leader proposes a different alternative, leaving Mak-wi Young intrigued about what his idea could be. The elder raises his index finger seriously as he prepares to detail the terms of this new option. He offers the youth the official position of registered secular disciple, so he can continue there. Shui Young tilts his head in confusion and repeats the word, not quite understanding what that title means. The narration explains that the names of all main Wuding disciples are recorded in the ancestral hall. The leader says he will register his name, but will still allow him to act as a secular disciple. The elder reveals that this rare position is called a registered secular disciple, and that there is already a historical precedent for it. He says Wuding created this role in the past, during the demonic cult's attack to bolster their defenses. Why? Young recalls that this was over 100 years ago and asks, curiously, what exactly will change for him. The leader explains that he will be able to learn Wuding's arts, but will also have to answer the sect's call. The elder narrows his eyes piercingly and adds that there is a crucial condition to this Wuding offer. He reassures the boy, promising there will be no pressure or forced obligation for him to accept the term. Why? Young blinks in surprise at the words, not expecting so much freedom to be granted by the sect's elders. The youth starts to reflect, wondering if such an incredibly advantageous deal is even possible to strike. He imagines doing business under the Wuding name. Realizing the massive influence the sect's brand would bring, he gets even more excited thinking he could sell Wuding-themed merch and make huge profits from fans. The boy realizes he can use Wuding's prestige for his businesses, while keeping the freedom of a secular member. Suddenly, Cheong-su gives Young a subtle elbow nudge, snapping him out of his thoughts and bringing him back to reality. Young calms down, focusing on the fact that he will be able to stay in the sect, training and trading at the same time. A mischievous smile crosses his face as he realizes the priceless value this official status will bring to his future. Without hesitating for a second, he pumps his fist energetically and yells enthusiastically that he accepts the proposal on the spot. The leader raises his hand asking for calm, reminding him that this rule was only used in times of crisis with the demonic cult. He explains that reactivating this law requires the approval of the Council of Elders, as he cannot decide on his own. He holds up 3 fingers and cryptically adds that the council's approval will not be granted to him right away. The elder reveals he will give the boy a grace period of exactly 3 months before bringing up the proposal. The leader explains that the elders will reject the idea because it looks like favoritism, so during those 3 months, he must take action. He firmly orders the youth to present the council members with a solid reason they could never refuse. Why? Young gulps, feeling the weight of that massive responsibility that just fell onto his shoulders. He worriedly asks the leader what will happen if he fails to prove his worth to the demanding elders. The elder calmly answers that in that scenario, the boy will be forced to become an ordinary disciple of the main sect. Or, if he still wants to leave Wuding no matter what, he will have his danchin destroyed according to their sacred laws. The scene cuts to the mountains of Wudong, showing the start of the young merchant's rigorous trial period. Master Cheonwa waits for him with a friendly smile, ready to oversee the grueling training routine. He congratulates the youth on his achievements in Yiqing and proudly celebrates being the one who recommended him to the sect leader. He praises Ichwai, Young's talent as the boy walks with a massive boulder resting on his back for the exercise. Why? Young thinks it is a good thing he hid the plan to be a registered secular disciple from him, avoiding a huge lecture. The boy throws the huge stone onto the floor hard, making a loud thud echo all over the courtyard area. Cheonwa announces he completed the required 20 reps, and that the day's physical training is over. The master praises the boy's quick adjustment, recalling that at first, he could not even handle a single repetition. He says his physical base is ready and mentions he will fetch some wooden swords, so they can start weapon training. Why? Young reflects that all of that physical endurance is actually purely due to the resilient Bodhi talent he acquired. He tiddies up the courtyard, thinking that to convince the council, he will need to put on a flawless combat performance. He knows that proving his martial talent is essential to get the support needed to become a registered disciple. Proving his commercial value is easy through his ideas, but showing sword skills will be the biggest issue of all. Since he is just starting to learn the ways of the sword, he fears he won't have anything impressive to show. Why? Young grips the hilt of the wooden sword, knowing that Wudong is, after all, essentially a sword sect. He waits focused and excited, about to learn the legendary sword moves of the traditional sect. Suddenly, the master bonks him on the head with the wooden sword, laughing and telling him to quiet his loud thoughts. Chiao announces that today he will begin learning the 3-talent sword art, leaving Hui, Young surprised. The boy is in disbelief, realizing that this is a basic technique anyone can buy on the street for 3 cheap coins. Chiao smiles and explains that the technique he will teach is different, making Mokwai, Young very curious to know how. The master points his finger right at the youth's chest, highlighting an extremely important point for learning. Cheonwa cryptically states that this mystery cannot be explained, but rather is something the disciple must create himself. Crows fly through the clear sky over the sect as silence settles in with that deep philosophical answer. Young complains about his habit of speaking in riddles, but the master jokes back that his comprehension is a bit slow. Cheonwa asks if he at least knows the basic stances of the art, and the youth admits he only knows them in theory. The technique focuses on 3 main moves: the heavy vertical slash, the fast diagonal strike, and the wide horizontal cut. Pleased with the conceptual answer, the master smiles and promises to explain it all in a very easy way. He announces that the great secret technique consists of repeating each of these 3 movements 10,000 times. Repeating each strike 10,000 times is the secret of the 3 disasters sword art he will teach the boy. Mokwai Young freaks out and yells angrily, saying 10,000 times is absurd, but master guarantees everyone goes through it. Cheonwa insists that a slow or fast pace does not matter right now, and he should just focus on meeting the daily quota. Right after that, the master leaps far away, wishing him a good practice, while the boy tries to stop him to no avail. He is left standing alone in the courtyard, grumbling that the master always says what he wants and disappears without explaining. The youth scratches his head impatiently, but decides to take a deep breath and try to keep a more positive attitude about the training. He decides he just needs to fill the daily quota no matter what. Planning to do the moves fast to get it over with, focused on his goal, he gets into a combat stance and grips the wooden sword with both hands. He makes the first strike, and the system interface pops up on the screen, logging only one vertical move completed. Moken. Young grits his teeth in terror as he realizes he still has 29,999 strikes left. The youth lets out a scream of rage that echoes throughout the mountain, desperate about how long it is all going to take. The day dawns calmly the next morning, with birds chirping softly in the branches of the Wudang temple trees. The wooden sword drops clumsily onto the stone floor, signaling the end of a long, exhausting night of hard work. Sitting in the courtyard, completely drained, he can barely believe he actually met that strike goal. The boy smirks and reflects that repetitive training also requires a very high level of dedication and talent. He recalls that holding the right stance for 10,000 reps in the Three Disasters art was a very difficult task. Young remembers how his muscles kept locking up and his movements got sloppy toward the end of the practice. He realizes that, with only the agile movement and firm body talents, he would never have pulled off the correct forms. Young remembers that a new, valuable system notification had popped up suddenly right before his eyes. Thanks to the special quest, he completed 1,000 strikes and got a 50% discount on the lowest tier sword talent. The youth grimly recalls the 15 silver taels he worked so hard for during the market negotiations. He laments that 2/3 of his precious reward had to be spent immediately right then and there to get the new talent. Despite the massive financial hit, the boy smiles, realizing the reward for all his effort was well worth it. He recounts that finishing that first stage and buying sword mastery was the key to his growth. Young performs a fast, precise move in the courtyard, slicing the wind in a highly professional manner. The difference in his skill is clear, even though that is the lowest level talent available in the system. Now he wonders if there is really any actual meaning in repeating this simple sword technique 10,000 times. Master Chianwa suddenly reappears in the courtyard with a serious expression, watching his disciple's performance. The master sighs from afar, noticing that all he has to do is look away for the boy to go back to his antics and joking around. He closes his eyes tiredly, wondering what he should do with such an atypical, unpredictable disciple. Chianwa walks up with authority and loudly orders the boy to stop what he is doing right away. He warns that even if the boy lacks talent, that joke has crossed the line, startling the youth who just saw him there. The master voices his concern, saying that at this rate, the young man won't even be able to join the evaluation match. Young turns his head, confused by the news, asking what this evaluative combat he mentioned is all about. A subtle, challenging smile appears on Chiangwa's face as he gets ready to explain the details of the match. He says it is a friendly duel between third-generation disciples to test their skills and encourage competition. Chiangwa steps closer mischievously and asks if the boy's competitive spirit has started to boil a little with the news. The youth freezes completely, speechless upon realizing that his cover and his plans are in serious danger of falling apart. Feigning enthusiasm in a highly ironic way, he raises his arm, pretending to be hyped for the dangerous challenge to come. Young asks if the other elders will be there watching, and the master confirms they want to see the future of Wuding. The youth smiles victoriously, realizing this will be his golden opportunity to prove his immense talent to the council. Young yells excitedly that he also wants to join the fight, but Chiangwa coldly replies that it is impossible. The youth is outraged by the rejection and asks if it's because he is older than the other disciples in his generation. The master hits him on the head again with the wooden sword, telling him to stop spouting so much nonsense. Chiangwa warns he will only embarrass himself if he does not master the Three Disasters technique, which forces him to train hard. Young asks with curiosity and concern about exactly when the evaluation match will be held. The master answers it will be in about a month, making the boy panic as he realizes how very little time is left. He thinks it over, figuring that landing 10,000 strikes in a single month is not impossible, but it still takes a lot of effort. He wonders with some concern if he can show off any decent martial talent using only this simple technique. Master Chiangwa watches the boy in silence, giving an analytical, thoughtful look at his true potential. He notices the boy's performance shifts depending on his mood, but admits he can already deliver very good vertical strikes. Even so, he finds it weird when the boy strikes weird poses, figuring he has trouble staying focused. The master worries that if he leaves him to train entirely alone, the youth might end up going down a dangerous martial path. Suddenly, Young lets out a startled yelp when the master surprisingly taps his back with the wooden sword. Cheonghwa seriously demands he take the training seriously, annoying the boy, who complains about the master's sudden action. The master warns that sloppy training gets him nowhere and announces he will personally fix his basic stances. He lightly kicks the boy's heel, teaching him to spread his feet shoulder-width apart to improve balance and focus. The master demonstrates in detail the correct, smooth way to grip the wooden handle before delivering the slashing strike. He guides him to execute the downward slash in a perfect, straight line, conducting the boy's movements with precision. Young's eyes widen as he feels the weight and perfect balance of that simple combat stance he learned. The youth realizes that the movement, with the master's guidance, feels like something on a completely different level than before. Cheonghwa smiles kindly and asks the youth what he thinks of that major change in his sword technique. Young stays completely silent with a serious look, processing the impact of that subtle posture adjustment. The master smiles with satisfaction and sarcastically asks if the kid still wants to keep just pretending he trains alone. The youth pouts in irritation as he gives in to the master's obvious talent, knowing the corrections were extremely helpful. With a resigned sigh, he accepts the help and asks the master to guide him however he sees fit from that moment on. The narration notes that 1 month flew by while the rigorous sword training continued day after day. Young is shown sitting on the stone floor, looking quite relaxed with a highly satisfied smile on his face. Seeing him so calm, Master Cheonghwa makes a friendly comment that the boy seems to be in an excellent mood today. The master asks if he has finished warming up, and the boy jokes back for him to return in an hour. Cheonghwa tells him to stop fooling around and just grab the sword, making the boy agree to that repetitive routine. The boy looks at the master's back and mentally admits that he is also an incredibly formidable person. He reflects that, despite the other disciples, the master spent 5 whole days focused entirely on helping him up close. He wonders if the master just wants to prioritize the training, or if there is some other personal reason behind his dedication. Cheonghwa notices his hesitation and asks what the boy is doing, just standing there, instead of holding and swinging his sword. The youth replies dismissively, assuring him he will get the exercise done, even without taking that annoying pressure from the master. He mentally acknowledges that, in fact, he only managed to truly enter the path of the sword thanks to his teachings. The master watches him with half-closed eyes, deeply focused on assessing the final result of that month of training. Young yells with immense determination that he will now show the result of all his exhausting training. He brings the wooden sword down with incredible force and surgical precision, making the air in the courtyard crack with the impact. He twists his body expertly, executing the diagonal move in a smooth, fast, and perfectly balanced way. He finishes the sequence imposingly, showing off a simply terrifying evolution since day 1. The slashes trace perfect lines of wind in the courtyard air, proving the impressive level his technique has reached. Finishing the moves, he lowers his head in exhaustion, catching his breath after letting out all his energy. He tucks the wooden sword at his waist with a fast, extremely elegant gesture that confirms his new posture. A subtle, proud, confident smile appears on the boy's face, knowing very well just how incredible his display was. The master stares at him in utter silence, his face serious and impassive, showing no immediate reaction to the strike. Feeling awkward with the master's tense silence, the boy asks, confused, why he is staring like that. He asks in surprise if the master is not going to say anything, having expected some comment on his great performance. The boy says he could at least mention that the basics are good, pulling a small smirk from the master. Cheonghwa chuckles, saying it was just a joke, and praises him by saying he is acceptable now, making the boy pout. Cheonghwa praises the youth, admitting he really changed and trained with focus even when left alone. The youth puts on a thoughtful look and answers casually that he just achieved something akin to enlightenment. He asks if his current level is enough to enter the evaluation match, making the master ponder the question. Cheonwoo decides to propose a final ask to verify his skills, making the boy a little apprehensive. The master walks toward the low walls and challenges him to block 10 of his attacks, using only the wooden sword. Instead of picking up a sword, he bends down and picks up a thin tree branch he found lying nearby in the garden. He shows off the branch with a big, friendly smile on his face, announcing he will use that piece of wood for the test.